go about doing that, like physically, even.
Are there two deferred items? I thought there was just one.
It's really the first thing.
Really the first thing, so do I just?
The courthouse?
sit-
Oh, yeah.
Is he working on the courthouse?
His firm.
Oh, DGP, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
right.
I think what we'll do, I mean, what we usually do is when we announce the project, before Jeff starts his report, you just say,
But you don't have to step down or anything.
Well, that's what I was, that's what. my
We've
question
typically
is.
not
Like, it's-
required people to go into another room or step down, you know.
Yeah.
typically, I've seen people at least,
Oh, yeah,
Not sit
actually, you're
here.
right.
Yeah, I
and-
can sit in the other.
That's
yeah,
right.
you're right, and,
yeah.
yeah, you're right.
You
in
have to sit
council
there
chambers,
completely
we would step
stone-faced.
down. The old video.
Well, at that point, I'm a member of the.
That's true.
Of the public.
Oh, then you can make comments in favor.
And you can.
Right, but I mean, I'm not.
No, that would be jerky. I'm sorry, to say the least.
I think it's.
Or get up and,
Yeah, I'll.
or get up and disagree with Eric on his presentation.
We do that in-house.
There you go. Oh, I have to download this. Download this puppy. Oh, do you need?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, we don't have a cord.
It's a pretty.
I may die.
Small agenda here.
Except for Jeff's add-ons.
In the,
I
I
agree
have
with-
I have hard
I agree
copy.
with you. It's,
Sorry, I just can't do it the
no,
night before.
I mean, it's,
Like, anyway, my date yesterday is like,
there's a reason they've got a 3-week deadline, right?
right,
Like,
yeah.
to get stuff to us and done, but.
Remy, do we have an extra extension cord? Do you think there's one? I mean, just tell me where it is here and I'll get it.
I don't know where people move things. I do.
Oh. I didn't mean to send you, but my battery is low too, so I might, depending on,
It's not loaded. We'll eventually.
Not in here.
so while we're meeting informally, do we have anything we want to talk about?
I do wanna add,
Come back to this part.
speak about it informally or formally, but I do think I wanted to add to our agenda, get the temperature of whether or not you, board feels that there, we should respond in any way to the zoning, conversation, or to the work that Preservation Piedmont has done.
Was that, so you circulated an email that several neighborhood associations had written. Is that the same one you're talking about?
Well, I'm just talking about the process in general.
Right.
But then Preservation Piedmont has been, doing a pretty exhaustive, detailed review of the, which I'm not sure how much of that has been shared broadly, but just wanna see, get a feeling of how, if we need to make a, any particular comment.
I mean, I don't.
We got the letters to council, to city council from Preservation Piedmont last meeting,
Mhm.
and then they spoke at the public hearing on,
Yeah, that makes some good
Last
points, I think.
Yeah, but the neighborhood letter, which I'm glad you forwarded, it was weird that it had North Downtown Residents, RESIDENCE Association, did you see that? The NDRA name is misspelled, which kind of,
yeah.
Laura was there.
and you and I are, you know,
Any
both live there.
conversation in North
It's RESIDENTS, not residents, look at NCE, so I was like wondering if that,
Seem kind of slapped together.
I didn't see any correspondence amongst North Downtown about it.
I didn't either, like, I think you said, I wasn't even aware that they had reconstituted or voted on anything, and I get their emails, they had some meeting, I think over the summer or the spring, and I certainly didn't,
It's not one that I really sought out to,
Mr. Timmerman?
Hello?
So did you didn't get an answer to your query to us, did you?
No,
Whether we
but
should
could-
engage on that, or,
That was it. Public session.
How are you?
Click on it.
Good, how are you?
and is El Jefe expected, Molly, or El Jefe, is he expected? Jeff?
Huh?
Small agenda today.
Yeah, I know, last couple, huh?
Oops.
missing something?
No, I was, no, I looked for anything, except for my computer.
We're not expecting Carl or Ron today?
They are, I know Carl is in the planning commission meeting, right?
That's
Isn't
right.
there a
Oh, is there
conflict?
one going on right
Yeah,
now?
and Jeff, I usually hear from Kevin before the meetings. I haven't heard from him.
I just noticed that Ron and Carl's name tags weren't out.
Yeah, and I don't think we did like a quorum check because we only had one item, so.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff?
How you doing?
Right.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. I've been looking for this.
Thank you.
I think my son left it at Jeff's.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's a little
A little
small.
small.
I just texted Kevin to see if he's,
So I know Kevin's not here.
Oh, he's-
Ron's not here, and Carl.
did either of them contact you?
Do we
Yeah,
have a
all of them.
quorum?
Oh, they all did? Okay.
Is it just more than half?
So
I
at
believe
least
so.
we do have
Then
So then we've got
quorum.
Should be
seven,
okay.
9 count.
All right, we got a quorum though.
So 5 is quorum, right? Because I'm gonna be recusing.
Oh, as long as we have to, as long as we start. the
Quorum is just
meeting.
attendance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
As long as we start the
Stepped
meeting.
into
Does
my
that mean
legal
we're going
hat
the wrong
for a
way?
moment.
Well, no, that's why I asked.
Why is there a planning commission meeting going on?
Yeah, it's
Because of the zoning
our
ordinance.
favorite publication is being debated again, so.
Favorite what?
Publication, I just,
Yeah.
it's like the code thing. And, you know, it's like
Hefe,
that.
Hefe Molly just asked us to speak into our speakers.
Well, this is not, I don't, we're not live.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Remy says we are. 5 o'clock. So all the snarky things I've said since 5 o'clock.
So, you know, and I'll ask you this, because what we normally did in the past, pre-COVID, I should make the comment the other night to the planning commission, it had been 3 years since I'd been in that room over there, and like, I made the comment, I said, I forgot how much I hate this room. But,
Really? You do?
Oh, that's, makes me
I've grown to like it.
feel like, it's like 1970s depressing. But
Huh.
the,
Which room?
This,
But
he doesn't
the,
like this room.
This one?
yeah.
You
This
mean
one or
this room or
chambers?
council chambers?
Council
Oh, I
chambers.
thought you were saying this room. I'm like, naturally,
So-
you know.
And just in case there's any confusion, people ask, right now, planning commission and council are over there. We, for the, at least as far as I know, will continue to meet in here until told otherwise.
I think we're lucky.
But it's where,
Closer to
you know,
pizza.
to Remy's benefit, I guess, when we had meetings before, in the old days, the preliminary discussions were, or not, the pre-meeting was in the conference room, public was welcome to attend, but it wasn't recorded or filmed. So I mean, I'm gonna have to get some clear, response to that. And the other part is, I had asked, you know, this evening, we're gonna have, and probably a lot less than what I had hoped, just because of the way I'm feeling, and I know we don't have the full group, but, if we had work sessions or discussions, you know, that wasn't, we would meet in the conference room and have those weren't recorded live, so, but.
They do have to be noticed.
Sure,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
you know, and so,
But you're right, it's a difference.
it's a different, so,
Yeah.
Mary, I mean.
Because they are open to the public, so, yeah.
So Missy said, keep rolling, so Remy, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get you, be able to go, and, but it's just, it's something we can talk about and review. I think there is, I mean, yes, the public's welcome, they can attend. I think some expectations with the whole Zoom thing, I don't know how we, although I don't want people, you never want people to not participate, but it has become the go-to thing. So, like, last week, it was a Thursday night, there was a hearing, and people signed up, but then people kept logging on, so there's no way to really know, how many people do we have here to speak? I don't know, there's pros and cons, I guess, to both.
How late
But,
did they end up going?
what's that?
How late did they end up going? I stayed
About
too-
9.
Till like
Yeah,
9.
okay.
How many people were
Maybe
there?
that's too much.
Was it packed?
No, and it was sort of a rolling crowd, you know, people spoke, came, went. But the question came up for the Historic Resources Committee last week, where we have a couple of people said, well, I'm traveling, can I call in? And it's like, no, because we're no longer, we're no longer doing Zoom, so, and if it was someone that we said, yes, we'll allow at this time, well, then it becomes, because it's like, can we call and put them on our phone? Do they have to be live and seen? What if all the members next month ask to, so we just said, no, we're doing it this way. So I don't know at what point, if the city even will say, if you, the public, want to know what's going on at a meeting, you can watch it, or you can participate at the meeting, so, but, sorry, hope that made sense. Were there any questions about, the items on the agenda tonight? And I don't have code.
Before, when we introduced the glass building, and Mr. Burrell's going to recuse himself. so
Correct.
Just let him respond.
Oh, yeah, and
Watching.
we had that on the consent. There were some, you all had some questions. Carl certainly did, so we moved it to regular agenda, but, and yeah, it's,
Didn't realize it was on
we
consent.
talked about a lot about recusals in the past, so, but this one is where his firm is engaged, so this is a no-brainer.
Yep.
Did you have any questions about that request, the project?
Oh, it's not on consent.
He said it was, but they moved it to defer.
Oh, okay, okay.
But, I mean, I do have something I want to talk about on that project.
What is that?
The infill of the Loja on the 1939 portion.
Yeah, it's a.
I've got my thoughts prepared.
Okay. And, the IPP designation,
Lounsburg.
it, to me, I assuming it's gonna be rather perfunctory, but, it is a recommendation that you all make to council in the consideration of a rezoning, and it's all part of a package for the whole development, so I'm just getting that recommendation, the box checked on that.
Who's asking for that and why?
The developer, it's a significant development over there on that whole end of where JPA and Emmett and Stadium Road wrap. So, there are a lot of, gears moving on that one, and the IPP designation is one, and as you know, so.
can you, I know there's a lot of information in our packet about it, but just for the conversation, can you clarify for the, what we're voting?
Yes.
What our recommendation is?
You're voting only singularly a recommendation that council either not remove the IPP designation or support removing the IPP designation. My assumption is that you all do not or will not recommend it, and that's fine. That's,
And that's prior to demolition versus approved.
so I put a condition in there for consideration.
The council's already
Yeah,
approved it.
if they were gonna approve demolition beyond our recommendation.
Correct. And because council in its resolution allowed, there had always sort of been this, loop of design review, new design, and council's option was to say, yes, following the BAR's recommendation, however, we will still allow ourselves, council, to consider removing the IPP at our discretion. So that's the point that they're at now. And so with that, it's, your recommendation would be then, and it's something to give some thought about, I put in there, period of time, I don't know, 6 months, 2 months, within the next month, provide the documentation. And, but I didn't, I wanted to do that just to simply say, don't link it to prior to demolition, because what if they take 2 years to get this project done, and they let that thing just, decline? So if we say, within X months, we want that, sort of while it's still fresh and alive. So that was my recommendation. I did include it in either, it's referenced in either motion, but you would have to read that motion. But it's very simple, and then it will work its way through the planning commission with, there's a series of things that have to be approved. There's other rezoning, there's some vacation of city right-of-way, there's a lot of parts, and that package will move through the system. And so I said,
So, but if they remove the IPP designation, it doesn't come before us again, right?
no, there's no.
Right, but if they don't remove it, then it does.
If they don't remove it, then the entire project is subject to
BAR.
BAR review.
So ultimately, it kind of is,
Can we-
do we want to deal with it or
Can we
not?
ask them to only remove the IPP designation after demolition? So what if they?
I don't think you
What
can.
if they remove the designation and then the project stalls out after 2 years? and
Exactly.
It's still standing and it's not
I
protected?
think that's what.
I
yeah.
think council's already answered that by,
They've already granted demolition
I thought it was a done deal.
But it
I
may
don't
not
disagree.
happen.
against
I-
our
I
recommendation.
don't
Our city
dis-
is-
But it's
our
a
city is
COA.
littered with done deals.
Yeah.
It's a COA, and they have 2 years to use it. So if they
Is it
don't,
2 or 1?
is it 1 or 2?
for what?
COA
Oh.
expiration.
Even
There's no
tighter.
COA. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, yes, the COA is an 18-month, easily extended, and
Oh, 18 months?
the period
Extended
of,
for how long?
for period of validity is 18 months from the approval of COA, which would be when council approved it forward.
But how long could it be extended?
A year.
Indefinitely? Oh, another year?
I mean, it's not a high bar for an extension.
So potentially 2.5 years?
Yeah,
It's a big project. I mean,
it is significant, and I'm not disagreeing with your, I
we
was
all,
saying,
we
if
all
you,
have lived here for a while and seen projects,
yeah,
Keith Woodard, every project that Keith Woodard talks about, I feel like, because he's so conservative, never gets built. I mean, I respect him for it, but
so it's a, I mean, it doesn't, it's really a knot that must be untied before they start the design review. And, if they said, so that's the only point, next step, that whenever that starts, are they working with the BAR or are they working with the ERB? I don't know how quickly this thing's going to move forward, but I think if you all can, again, it is only a recommendation, whereas before you were taking a formal, yes, no vote on something, this is a recommendation to council, so if you want to give some thought to how to word that and add it in, we certainly can.
Is that the main difference for them, their process, is that whether or not they come in front of us again?
Right, yeah.
Is that their main motive?
Because, no,
We're just trying to clean things up.
yeah, there's a lot of boxes to check on this one. It's got that property next door where council sold it with the stipulation not be developed. There's a road behind 104 Stadium Road that we think is a road. No, I mean, there's
Paper
some.
Street.
Yeah, there's some really, it's some circumstance, there's a lot of little details in this one. And that's why I said, I just kept this thing narrowed down to what is the question before the BAR? There was a lot of discussion about, like, oh, well, does the BAR comment on rezonings or, and these other things? And no, you only comment on a rezoning or a zoning amendment if it relates to historic designation being added or removed.
Just out of curiosity, if it stayed in IPP and the design got brought to us, is only the part of the design that sits on that property subject to our review, or is the whole project subject to our review?
The whole project.
The whole thing.
Okay.
That happened
by-
with Dairy Central.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's where it kind of gets, where, yeah, I mean, Dairy Central we split it between the backs, went to the entrance corridor, even though it was in the back of Dairy Central, that parcel. The other time we had it with Tarleton Oaks, that was, gosh, the first couple of months I was on board. Still not sure exactly how we handled it, but yes, because now if they carved it out and separately developed everything, not touching 104 Stadium Road, they will only bring 104 Stadium Road to you. I don't see that happening. But I said, I don't know. I'm not trying to recommend you all don't make that statement about the demolition, but
Well, I don't think
Give it
it's
some
up
thought.
up to us to come up with the mechanism that I think we can state our
Right.
concern that if the project didn't get moved forward, that the property retain its protection.
Mhm.
And I sent the email out late last night. I apologize. It was a little, Craig Jackson had asked me a couple things. One about the 416, 418 West Main, and adding some canopies on the west side. I don't know exactly what the questions were. It seemed rather simple, but I said, you're welcome to come and ask you all. You
So
know.
he is gonna be
He
there?
he should be, or he may be on Zoom. And then across the street at Tonic, at least across from City Hall, is the old Mickey Publishing.
Company.
And they are interested in changing out some of the windows in there. I had said, when I talked to Greg, now, it's a, 19, I think, 30s, 40s, 50s industrial building. Those windows really, they are. But I said, unless you had something that would be, some idea, I said, you can certainly ask the BR. I'm not going to say no. But it's another one of those where we do have, seems like the old metal windows aren't treated as respectfully as, historic wood windows. But it is where, from your experience, you all as designers, is where have those old metal windows been cleaned up, reglazed? Can they be reglazed with insulated glass? What are the options? I had a good chat with Mary Joy yesterday, and we were just talking about windows and how, replacing windows cost $2,500 a window, for a decent grade window. And I've been dealing with some projects on West Main that are asking about windows. And I'm like, God, why don't you find somebody that can fix this? And they're like, there's nobody that will fix windows. Nobody in town. And I was like, gotta be someone out there, you can just say, I'll give you $1,000 a window. Do what you can do. And, for some time I've had on my list to go out to K-Tech and say, all right, can you guys bring someone in here to teach kids how to fix windows? Because someone could make bank doing it. So those are the two things that you'll hear from Greg Jackson. And I think it's just, it's relatively simple, but
Go burn, fix windows.
Well, having done that once, restored a double hung, a massive couple of double hung, I don't think it's something you want to do.
it is, it's not, yeah,
But I hear you, there's,
this is where, well, for example, on West Main, been working with Cliff Fox, and I think it's 711 West Main. It's on an end building as you go towards the bridge. It's got the stamped metal, they're like columns, and it's really an interesting design. I learned that that's made by the Mesker Foundry of Chicago or something, so been learning about them. But they're 1980 windows that are in there. They're these kind of clunky metal replacement windows, and he's like, I want to change them out. It's like, so that's not historic. So I'm working with him to say, oh, we have some old photos, we could get something more appropriate in there, but it doesn't seem to me, that's one of those cases where I can't imagine I need to come to you and say, is it okay to put to take out these non-historic windows. But yeah, windows and trees are the big ones. There's also, I think, Breck, I had asked you about a year ago, when you're going on Grady Avenue, and there's that 1950s apartment just past, maybe it's just past 14th Street. Got two huge cryptomeria in front of them, and they're right up against the building. So, but I'll talk about that one later. But I have also, this week, someone called me about a dead tree. It's dead. I once again said, I'm not, that actually doesn't look safe, cut it down. Don't pin that on us, but working with them on. The thing we have now is with the new ordinance, site plans are required, and some revisions to site plans are required for a whole lot of things, including tree removal. So that'll at least give us another tool to say, and you must replace it. Other than that, it's 5:30. If you all wanted to jump in, I see Eric is here, and it's at your pleasure.
Good evening. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville Board of Architectural Review. Staff will introduce each item, followed by the applicant's presentation, which should not exceed 10 minutes. We'll then ask for questions from the public, followed by questions from the BAR. After the questions are closed, we'll ask for comments from the public. For each application, members of the public are allowed 3 minutes to ask questions and 3 minutes to offer comments. Speakers should identify themselves and provide their address. I'll also note that everybody is encouraged to speak carefully into the microphones, as the minutes for tonight's meeting and all of our people following along at home only have access to the audio that's coming through our microphones. Comments should be limited to the BAR's purview, that is regarding only the exterior aspects of a project. After our discussion and before taking action, the applicant will have up to 3 minutes to respond. Tonight, the first item on the agenda are matters from the public that are not on the agenda, or if someone would like to speak to something that is on the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda only includes our meeting minutes. Are there any matters from the public? Anybody following along online? No?
If you're on the Zoom and you'd like to speak at this time, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're joining us via telephone, you can press *9.
Ramey's got an excellent radio voice. I'm
Yeah.
jealous.
Chair, I see no hands raised at this time.
Excellent. Okay, first item on our regular agenda is the consent agenda. And tonight, as I said, the meeting minutes from August 15th, 2023. Any discussion? Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Aye. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. The next item on our agenda is the first deferred item. It's a COA application for 410 East High Street.
And as one of the principals of DGP Architects, I need to recuse myself on this item.
All right, if you'll give me a second, I realized I just logged into the planning commission meeting.
Have we been
Have
been
fun there.
broadcast live?
I think our meeting's more fun.
All right, yeah, Molly has she has the control, so she can bring up any images. So this is a COA request for, excuse me, renovations, rehabilitation, and a new addition or a new construction at the Albemarle County Courthouse, which is on the west side of Park Street from the Lincoln Building project that we've been looking at. And the primary piece of this is construction of a hyphen, if you will, at the rear over top of the existing sally port, and some alterations to that sally port. With that, it's in addition onto the 1938 office building next to the courthouse. So the historic courthouse building is not being changed. But with this new work, there will also be on the south side, the south elevation, there's an entrance into the office building that they'll be enclosing with some window units just to create a weather, a lock there so to get for the entrance and some changes there to the courtyard. With those new construction projects on there a series of rehabilitation work, rehab work, repairs, maintenance on the historic courthouse building and on the 1938 building, and also on that 1980s hyphen that connects the two. So it's a lot going on here. Not necessarily everything is under the BAR's. It's not within the COA, but so that the primary things that bringing to you tonight are that the new Sallyport, the alterations to the south entrance, and I know that the windows replacements in the 1938 building, which is all part of the rehabilitation project. So this is whereas before with the Levy building, that was a city-county project, this is the county. This is their project here. Same architect and that Fentress, and then Mr. Antman representing DGP locally, so talking to the same people. Do you all have any questions for me? Well, I guess briefly, we had this on the agenda last month. There were some questions, and we just felt easier to get those answered and bring it to you tonight. So that's why it got bumped last month. Anything I can answer for you, and I said Eric is here and his folks are online as well, if there are any questions that they can respond to.
Can you give a short presentation to a couple items I wanted to address?
Yeah.
The floor is yours. Yes, it's a new arrangement. Just lean into it. We're made for TV now.
Hello, I'm Eric Antman from DGP Architects here in Charlottesville, 206 5th Street Northeast. I have two colleagues on the Zoom call, also they're signed up as speakers, Steve White from Fentress Architects, and Drew Taylor from Roadside Harwell Landscape Architects. Do you have them? So just in case you have questions that are details I can't handle, they're available to handle those also. As Jeff mentioned, thank you for the email dialogue over the last 6 weeks or so, fielding a bunch of questions. Hopefully that will streamline our conversation tonight. Happy to address anything else that you may have for us tonight. I wanted to thank Jeff for including in the staff report the 1997 paint analysis previously that had been done, that the BAR had approved. So we are planning a full corner-to-corner repainting. We will use those colors. That was one of the questions, and Jeff provided that information, so that was very helpful. Otherwise, just to clarify, there are 5 building campaigns, each of different historic value: 1803, 1859, 1865, and 1938, 1983. Is that 5? Right. The Sallyport, I think, is the same vintage of 1983. It may be a few years later, but post-1980s. So each of those periods has different historic value, right? They're not all the same, and we're sort of really leaning on the first 3 building campaigns of what is today the County Circuit Court as being sort of the period of significance, or the most significant historic period that we're looking for to preserve as much as we can. So just to address the windows with respect to those building campaigns, the Circuit Court, which is the 03, 59, 65 eras, we are keeping and restoring those double hung windows. They may have to sashes come out and go to the shop, but we'll be using interior storm windows, some of which are UL level 3 bullet resistant. Those are the ones where you have a line of sight from the exterior to basically the courtroom. the circuit courtroom, historic circuit courtroom. Others will just be thermal interior windows. We did look at using a similar system in the other portions, specifically 1938. The performance of those windows is really not equal to new clad double hung sashes. Thus, our intent for 38 is the same thing that we're doing on the Levy building, which is retaining frames, exterior casings, and wood subsills in place and restoring, and then discarding sashes and putting in new aluminum clad with the same mountain patterns for sashes that have insulated glazing rather than using interior storms. Over time, the interior storms really, if you go in the 1938 building now, which has interior storm windows from the late 20th century, half of them are missing, a quarter of them are broken, a quarter of them don't operate. They're not nearly as effective. So our approach overall to restoration, rehabilitation, renovation, those are three different levels of balance between priority of historic fabric and modern concerns, being sustainability, maintenance, upfront cost, right? So there's no single answer to a restoration, rehabilitation, renovation project. The answer has to fit sort of a constellation of priorities. And that's sort of a case example. The different treatment of the windows sort of reflects that level of prioritization. So that's really all I have. Unless you have other questions that weren't addressed in previous correspondence, we can handle those.
Okay, we'll go first to see if there's anyone online or anyone here who has from the public that has a question. Or questions from the board. I have one to start. Some of the drawings didn't have a key on them, but there are a variety of different hatches, and on one of them, the number of the chimneys are hatched. Is there work going on in the chimneys or
Sure.
removals? Or?
So the restoration, can you go to a next slide that'll, I think is, no, there's, maybe go back. There should be some elevations that have colored hatch patterns on them that are the restoration drawings for masonry, I think are the ones that you're referring to. So those are different levels of the masonry work. So we're repointing in areas where mortar has failed. We are not cutting out any Portland cement mortar. That can do just as much damage. If it's been this long and it hasn't damaged the brick, we're going to leave it alone. But where mortar has failed, we will cut it out and replace it with lime mortar. And so that's one hatch pattern that you may have seen. Another is brick replacement, where particularly the salmons that are usually softer, if they've degraded, they'll be removed, cut out, and matching brick put back in. There are also areas, particularly down in the lower level of the 1938 building, where you have those areaways, which are at the High Street grade level, which are below grade in this view you're seeing now. Those areaways have had clogged drains for a while and standing water, so you have a combination of rising damp, efflorescence, and algae. So there's cleaning is another hatch pattern that's shown. So yeah, those are all masonry really restoration notes. That's the intent.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. Any other questions from the board?
I guess I have a question about the, let's see, the addition. So I'm on page 13. That covers all of the windows. Just curious what the use is of those windows. I don't think I've been in that. Let's see if you go backwards one page. No, maybe not. Maybe I'm on a different.
The elevations keep going down one more. It's that elevation of the east wall of the 1938 building.
Yes, it's on page 13 of our packet.
So in this plan here, the area that's stippled in
There we
red,
go. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
what is that?
So I guess I was just curious what what the effect of that new corridor is on those currently exterior windows. Those are, it's a couple of meeting rooms.
Yeah, those windows are scheduled to be removed and the openings infilled.
And then I guess I had another question about the front elevation where you are infilling the portico with windows and a door.
Yes.
Is that just to create a vestibule?
Yeah, it's a weather vestibule. So right now, there are two deficiencies basically that's the current district court. It's going to be the new entrance to 2 circuit courts. So the use is changing. But the 1938 arcade portico, currently there is no queuing space. So you come in and like the security magnetometer is at the front door. So if there's a line, you're in the rain. You're outside, literally. So that's really.
Actually, that's not correct. The security is only at the courtroom, which is about 10 feet in, but it's
right. So
it's a bad setup.
in the revised plan, were we to not have a
Right.
weather lock,
You want
the magnetometer will not be
Right.
where it is currently. Sorry, right, in
Yeah.
the new plan. So in order to accommodate that queuing space in an interior space, that's the reason for enclosing it. Plus, just there's no weather lock, there's a single door.
It's currently a wasted space. Unless it's raining, people are not there, people are smoking there. It's
Correct.
really, yeah, it's a smart move.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
Not that the conditions will be the same, but because you're rearranging that interior space, but I have seen litigants and parties lined up and down that hallway, snaking that hallway.
Correct.
Previously and out the door,
Right.
waiting to get into that, and granted, it's not gonna be a general district court, it'll be circuit court, I know you're rearranging the courtroom, but there's just no room when you get in there, and, even to get like halfway up the hallway to the elevator, for someone who needs to go upstairs, who doesn't even wanna be part of the functions on that
Right.
floor, is really impossible.
Mhm.
It's a good move.
The other exterior improvement is the current ramp addition, which was done as part of the 1983 hyphen, leads to 2 doors which aren't public. They go to secure doors, which does provide equal access for someone with a mobility
Right.
disability. You have to ask for special permission to get
Yeah,
in. You
you
don't
do.
have the same experience. So that's the other reason for enclosing that and doing the ramp to the arcade.
The follow-up question I had
Sure.
about that was just, can you speak a little bit more about the exterior stairs and how that gets changed with the new door/windows? If it does.
On the South Plaza? At the
Just
new
in that
primary
same-
entrance?
In that same portico, yeah, on the south, you've got stairs.
Oh, the
but they-
existing, the steps at the arcade that are there now.
Yeah.
Right, so that'll be, I think they're limestone, those basically monolithic blocks that are the current treads, if you will.
Yeah.
They'll remain in place,
Okay.
right? So that floor is actually being raised 6 inches or so, just enough to provide, so you can see just in that picture where the center arch is, there's another threshold further back at the door. So the masonry floor level of the arcade is still about 6 inches below the floor level of the interior.
Oh.
So the arcade floor level is being raised up, so the ramp that occurs on the exterior can get you all the way up to the interior floor level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those steps will remain and be encapsulated in the new construction, so hypothetically reversible.
In the stair, and so if you were to go into that main front door, you're like stepping up, how much of a landing do you have there? I'm trying to have
Well, currently, the door is at the
door's there.
threshold like it would be in a home.
Oh, okay,
The doors swing essentially over the level change.
gotcha. You need to take me on a tour.
It's a mess.
So sorry,
I'm
I
sorry.
had questions that are following up on the same area. I guess if we go to the floor plan, the first floor plan, sheet 48 of the PDF. There you go. So Eric, I guess just to clarify, the existing steps that are currently at the face of the loggia aren't shown here. So the plaza is going to, the plaza itself, the new plaza will raise up and be at the same elevation of the raised loggia floor?
Of the interior
Right.
floor, which is 6 inches higher
Higher
than
than it
the
is now.
current arcade floor.
And then the plaza will be that same elevation? So you
Correct.
kinda have- So
With
the,
just enough, slope for positive water
so
drainage.
as you said, then the limestone steps are basically getting encapsulated under all that?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the other question is, looking at this floor plan, it looks like y'all are closing the front door and changing the 2 side windows into doors. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yep. So as you go in, the west door, which is the one on the left, is the indoor, and you can see the queuing space there,
Yeah.
which is where we'll have, the barrier set up so people can line up, and then overflow queue space can be in the weather lock. And we actually know, based on sort of the occupant load and the expected case loads, that interior queue space does not accommodate everybody.
Sure.
That'll always be in line. And then the outdoor is the east door on the right.
Got it.
So you essentially, and that door is locked from the exterior, so you can't sort of piggyback in the exit door.
So were those, I guess I don't know if I missed it, was that change of that fenestration called out anywhere else, and were there details related to that in the packet?
No, but they will be the same as the arcade windows, essentially.
Okay. I've got comments on that, but I'll wait till the comments section. But I am a little concerned about the change in administration, so anyways, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can we discuss the High Street elevation? Can you go to the Sally Port? There's a picture that has a bunch of items called out. Yeah, that one. So just to clarify, the replacement wall with the garage door is basically in a similar location.
Yes.
That wall's not moving further out towards High Street.
It's actually moving back. So right now, it's essentially flush with the 1938 construction at the northeast corner. You can see it in the photo there. The brick is almost like toothed in, so it's a flat wall. It's actually going to move back around, I think, 18, maybe 16 inches or so that the cornice of that one-story addition above the first floor will be received into the 1938 brick. So it's actually moving back so that there's a step which will actually better acknowledge the different periods of building campaign as well.
Got it. Thank you.
I went over and took a bunch of photographs from various angles, so if you want to see something clear, I can call up an image if you need.
All right, I think we'll, unless there's any other questions, we'll move to comments. Any comments from the public here or online? And I think we can open up to comments from the board. Go ahead, Mr.
All right.
Zemer.
So I'll start with the arcaded loggia. My preference would be to leave it open, but I understand there's weather concerns. And I did a little research because I think that the arcaded loggia of Virginia courthouses is kind of a signature of, it's part of what makes Virginia architecture. Of the 95 county courthouses in the Commonwealth, roughly 60 have neoclassical porticos, about 19 have open arcaded loggias, and then 15 or so are, I'll just call other. And I think that, our oldest courthouse here has a portico, and then this 1938 edition, you know, consciously had this arcaded loggia, I think, to kind of harken back to the colonial period courthouses in Virginia. So personally, I feel pretty strongly that we should not have divided light windows there. I think if we have to enclose it, I'd encourage us to just do kind of a single pane type glass, recessed to the back edge of the brick if at all possible, just because that would, from the street and from the exterior, still kind of read as a void. I think if you start infilling it with a Muntin window, and I know you're kind of matching up with that 1983 hyphen that's adjacent to it, but I still feel like it's honorific to the past and the future if we leave that reading as voids. I would just point out at the Caroline County Courthouse, they built, I guess, a new annex also, and did just that. So I've got a picture of it if you'd like to see it. And you know, I think it's pretty successful in the way it provides weather shelter, but still kind of has that solid void pattern. So I would encourage y'all to do that. And then in terms of the change in fenestration, just from the front door and then changing those two windows to doors, I guess I feel like we'd need to see some details on that, because they weren't included in the packet. I'm not necessarily opposed to it because I understand functionally it's very important for the courthouse to work right, and especially for entrance and exit. But I just don't know if we can approve it without seeing details. So those are my comments.
That's an interesting comment about the Virginia architecture and the solid void.
And I brought my Courthouses of Early Virginia, if anybody would like to
I'd like to see that.
peruse.
I'd like to see the picture too, of
Sure.
what you were talking about.
Which on the cover has a
Yeah,
courthouse
and
with a loggia.
Hanover County Courthouse, King William County Courthouse is probably the earliest version here. Instead of, it's the reason Virginia rest stops look the way they do on our interstate system.
How much, I guess, I have a question, just how much, what was the influence for how you created that fenestration? Was it the 1983, just trying to not create too many dissimilar elements? And
It was, but this is actually a really good suggestion, and I'll actually say it's already being considered.
Okay.
It's a really good input,
Yeah, yeah,
and not difficult to achieve.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, in that case, then, I was, one thing I'd like to see is, I don't know if you have any 3Ds of that, you know, that, I'm looking at the rear picture, where we have the Sally Port, and then I always, I guess, never consciously, but walking down the street, I always appreciated the stark contrast between the two buildings, you know, and you see that mostly behind that Sally Port, which always was a little bit of an eyesore and getting in the way of really appreciating those two buildings. And so I wish we could do something about that, or maybe that screen, that was a 1983 version too, I think, the porous brick screen. But I guess I'm a little concerned, and I think I need to see it. I'm looking at it in elevation, but I'd love to see the sort of massing of that enclosed volume in the back.
It shows on the east elevation, you know, it
Yeah.
shows that relationship.
Yeah, I just, I think it's the sort of flatness of that wall and being able to appreciate that building as one entity, you know, as opposed to, and then you've got the connector, and then you've got the old, now you've got another mass that's being added in there that's sort of creating a little bit more ambiguity, and that's why I don't know exactly, but it'd be interesting, I think, to see the 3D massing of how all those things come together, because there's already a lot going on there, and I guess my concern would be that that's just adding another mass that kind of jumbles things up, and I wonder too, you know, you're just gonna close those, windows off. I wonder, I know that obviously this is there's weather issues and considerations, but I also wonder if there's any possibility of taking that volume and making it less of a volume and more of a, you know, another loggia or an open corridor that will allow for those windows to remain, or allow some natural daylight to go into those rooms, and then, you know, a less kind of permanent or more of a porch-like, you know, or a alley sort of structure would allow you to sort of pretty easily discern the old from this new and understand that, you know, that distinction. Just a thought, and I think that tool of looking at it from 3D would help sort of understand that a bit better. That's all I have for now.
Can I go back to a question?
Sure, these are comments, so I'm not saying anything, but.
Okay, so on.
Please go ahead, yeah.
On page 48, which was the drawing, sorry.
Floor plan.
Thank you, floor plan, I couldn't think of the name. And I'm looking at the weather vestibule. You've got a handicap ramp, but you don't have a door. Is that just an oversight, that you don't have a door drawn on the, it would be on the east side of that weather lock?
No, that's an intermediate landing, and you're still rising up to the plaza level.
So you'd still have to come around the front and go, and there's a singular door to get in the
Correct.
vestibule.
So you
So
have
if
the
I'm
same.
on, so if
Well, it's
I-
the same experience as
so
if
I'm
you
in
walk
a
up the steps, use the same
wheelchair,
door.
I go up the ramp and still have to come in. Okay,
Not have to, get to. It's the
I-
same door everybody uses, which is what you're supposed to do.
yeah, but you're effectively filling in, I mean, you've got glass and fill on that side, anyway.
But the grade change.
That
will allow you
landing's
to
gonna
have
be
that door.
below.
Right. You're not there, you're not level yet
Right.
at that, yeah. at that
Exactly.
point. Okay,
And I do agree with Mr. Antman. I think the purpose for behind ADA is to experientially have
Yeah.
the same experience.
entrance.
as everyone
You don't have
else.
to come in the back.
Right. I guess this is a question too, but did y'all think about, instead of encapsulating those original limestone steps, just moving them out to be the new steps? Because that,
We could, the quantity isn't sufficient though.
Okay.
So there are more steps in the new construction than are there currently,
gotcha.
by like half.
Okay.
I did ask that.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's sort of a shame, you know, it's, in theory, it's great, oh, we encapsulate they're there in case this gets reversed, but the likelihood of that is pretty unlikely and or very far into the future. So it kind of wonders, you know, maybe even a cap for the cheek wall or something, but anyway, I'm not gonna fight too hard on that.
I'd like to just back up and say I think that this project is trying to tackle so many things that's really tricky, but it seems like this is going to bring a lot of excellent new functionality to this building, and with the exterior renovations is going to give this some new life and some applaud the change in the trim color. I think it's going to be generally, I think most people probably won't notice that a whole lot has changed with the exterior appearance, but I think it's going to work a lot better, and I think that's a tricky thing to pull off. So I'm supportive of the project.
Yeah, I know we don't look at the interior space, and I just tell you from my past experience and past work in the city and the county, I think all the way back to 2010 maybe, that there was this discussion of how do we use the space, how do we, and so there's a lot of programmatic things driving what's going on in these buildings. There's a lot of pushing and pulling and moving things, and it's linked to what's going on behind Levy Building, and so there's all of this is sort of that accommodating those changes that are happening or are coming with the court system. So I agree with you, it's been a three-dimensional puzzle, and they've been grappling with it for a long time, so it's kind of neat to see it coming to fruition.
And if I could just tag on to that, the number one issue is safety and security, right? So you have judges walking through public lobbies, juries mixing with the public, which is just, it's just not okay, right? And so that's the reason for that corridor that nobody loves. It's two corridors because there's
corridors, yeah.
public, staff, and judge.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the reasoning, you know.
I left that, I think I left that open-ended. I realized that's secure, and I think I left that open-ended just with the question of, were there other alternates explored, like making that, syncing that connection, maybe a floor below, you know, where you go downstairs and go up. I know that's less convenient, but just curious if those sorts of ideas were entertained.
Factual correction, there are no juries. There are no jury people in this annex currently.
These are two circuit courts.
Right, they will be. But currently in that hallway, there are no jurors because it's a general district court and they don't have juries. And the judges do come from another way. They don't, they're not in that hallway.
The new program is
Correct.
two
It's
circuit
circuit
courts
court.
with juries.
I understand.
So that's what I'm talking about, to
Yeah.
repurpose the building as a circuit court. We have to provide separate circulation.
So where is the security sort of checkpoint in this, and we're looking at the annex, 1938?
Sure, so the west door there, and then you go through the queue, sort of the last thing before you're in the public
There's
lobby
like
room.
a desk there?
That's
Okay,
correct.
so it's
And-
like there are two, I don't know, there are
Zero.
two
That's-
oval shapes?
That's
Would
the
that be-
magnetometer.
Okay,
Correct.
okay.
And then there's also, the primary security station is also behind the center opening.
I saw that.
So that's sort of like
So
where the
they're
computer
watching.
is, and,
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
door controls and communications center, and that's right at the exit door also.
I favor this, provided that the vestibule is not used as a security area. When members of the public, litigants, you know, this is an important place where people's futures are determined, even if it's short of a criminal trial or
Yeah,
action.
right now they hang out in the plaza in front of the circuit court, outside.
Yeah.
Right,
Which
exactly.
Which is fine, and what I want to say is that if I'm meeting a client, I don't necessarily want to be having that meeting inside of the building, because they're confidential things that I may have to tell my client,
Right.
or my client wants to tell me at the last minute, that I don't want to say, you know, when you're in a very I mean, this is still going to be a very crowded hallway, and you don't know, you know, the adverse party could be right next to you and you don't know who they are.
Right.
So those conversations you don't want them to be occurring inside the building.
Correct.
But on a rainy day, you need a place, you know, families need a place to gather as they all walk in. You know, litigants and their counsel and other people, mediators, you know, anybody accompanying anybody into court, guardians ad litem, need a place to meet the people that they're going to, you know, be working with inside. Attorneys need a place before they go through the gauntlet. And I just want to make sure that the vestibule is not taken over as an additional security gauntlet.
Right. There are an appropriate number of also attorney-client conference rooms that are new on the
Right.
interior as well.
But usually you don't, first of all the current ones are always locked for security reasons, which is good. You have to go to the clerk's office to get a key to open them up. I can't just dash in there for 5 minutes before court with the client. And the way that the clerk's office is currently set up, it's the other end of the building, so it's not convenient. They're never open, you know, for good reasons. You don't want somebody in there. And it's also just not convenient. I mean, you really do want a weatherproof space, and enclosing that space works, where people can meet up.
Sure.
And Mr. Ziemer's suggestion, instead of having fenestration on those voids, you know, on the loggia, to just have clear glass is even better, because then I can see, oh, my client's standing right inside, he's waiting for me.
Right.
You know, waving at me, or opposite, you know, somebody's looking for me and they see me outside. You know, those meetups are really, really important. And especially we're creating more courtrooms, which is great, which is much needed for circuit court. We have 2 currently, and one is the tiny one, that I love upstairs, but
Not
it's
accessible.
insufficient. But we're also still not solving our parking problem for this courthouse, and people are arriving, either parking at Market Street.
So I just want to remind all of us, many of these interior uses and the discussion of how this functions are tied to exterior, but we are
Right.
tasked with reviewing the project that's been put forward.
Yeah,
Under
I'm
our
talking about
guidelines.
the exterior space, either the front plaza or the vestibule.
The
or-
arcade, yeah.
Because you need a place where people gather
Mhm.
before they enter the courthouse. And I've expressed the reasons why you don't want to be in the courthouse doing your business. You want to be quiet and walk into the courtroom. So, yeah, anyway. But I'm saying that we're not solving the parking problem downtown. People are coming from different directions. Somebody may be in the Market Street garage. Somebody got a parking place in the neighborhood in North Downtown. People, there's not like a parking garage right next door. We can predictably think my attorney or my client or my guardian ad litem is going to meet me right there, and there's a stream. People come from all over to go to this courthouse plaza because of the
Sure.
parking situation. So, anyway, thank you.
Other comments?
Yeah, I have a few other questions, I guess, or comments. That new addition on the back, that secure, are those all new windows along there, or?
Yes. So that's a good question. One of the comments that we reviewed in the last 6 weeks that came through via email was reuse of removed 1938 windows, which was taken out of this
I like-
resubmittal.
Yeah.
So based on kind of the philosophy that I explained earlier for sash replacements in 1938 windows, really doesn't make sense to try to reuse things that are coming out of 1938 construction in modern construction. We'd by default replace the sashes anyway,
Yeah.
and then we'd be moving 1938 frames and sills and putting sashes in them, which doesn't really make sense. So all new, all clad windows for the new openings, correct?
So what would be
Which will
your-
further differentiate new construction from historic.
Yes, I guess that begs the question, what is that addition above the sally port gonna look like? Are you gonna try to match the brick? Are you gonna try to do something complementary?
It
Are
will
you-
match the 1983 brick, which is
Oh.
not historic.
Okay.
Well, it's now 40 years old, but, right, it's not the
40.
period of significance that we're referring to.
Well, I'll also just reiterate Breck's comments and that, just commend you on the project. It's obviously a tricky, a lot of moving parts and, a chess game in a lot of ways. And so appreciate the, sort of the ethos of a clear distinction between the different eras and the, obviously the attention to preservation.
I have a small comment about the Sallyport addition. It is a very prominent view that people drive by right there on High Street. And the current gate might not be beautiful, but it does allow like airiness and doesn't take away from the prominent building that's right there on High Street. So including that will still be very prominent. I was relieved to see that I think the dark bronze finish on the door is much better than it being like a bright silver metal. And, I do think it'll be different there on High Street, but, I appreciate that the door is receding a little bit in the color choice rather than making it prominent.
Was there any thought about doing anything with the wall around the mechanical equipment, revising it in any way, or was your thought that since it's not being touched, just leave it alone?
Yeah, we're going to leave it alone. It has to allow airflow, so the sort of open brick pattern was intentional, and similar equipment is going back, which also, which is quite large equipment, you know, just 3 feet of space is not sufficient, so it really needs to be air porous.
Do y'all have, I know you're putting some traditional sconce lights. Do y'all have like a basis of design for those?
We don't yet,
Okay.
but we could provide that for an administrative review if you'd like, along with any changes to arcade fenestration buttons.
Since we're back on questions, on the east side, sorry, just clarifications again.
Sure.
On the east side addition, are there currently jack arches on the second-story windows on that 1938? I'm just looking.
I think so,
It
yes.
look, I
and-
can't tell, sorry, I just can't blow it up. It looks like there are,
The measured drawings are the most accurate, which we did.
There are.
and I know you're putting them in, I just wondered if they're on the existing.
They're there.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it, but,
They're there.
okay, good, thank you. Okay, good. Does this need action by us?
Sorry?
Does this need action?
I think it
Yes, this is COA request.
does.
Is anybody ready with a motion?
I guess,
Because Carl's.
well, I guess I'm curious, especially the changes in the entrance fenestration. I think I'd like to see details on that. So I don't know how we move forward with that. Like, I could approve some of the, like the new corridor and the Sally Port, that sort of thing. I could get behind approving that. But the entrance to the 1938 building, I think I'd like to see details on the, changing the center door to, I guess, a window, and then changing the windows to doors. We should see details on that. It sounds like the applicant is amenable to my suggestion of
Yeah.
sort of a solid glazed enclosure for the loggia, but we should still see the details on that. And then the sconce lights, if we're gonna ask for details, go ahead and throw those in the mix. So I don't know, do we,
Want to approve and accept that out, or do we want to?
maybe
Can, Jeff, can you still do approvals contingent upon a final administrative review of details? I don't remember if that's allowed or not still.
Yeah, it's not an allowed, not allowed. It's a, it more came down to an approval of a COA, and I don't know, this is an unusual one, because given the nature of the entire facility and how we're working on this, it's, city and county don't pay a fee for an application, so it's, not like, oh, I have to give another, give me another application, I call it something else. Two ways to do it. I think that there's if there's something that, excuse me, you all would like to see specifically modified, and you can express that and then have it submitted for the BAR record. The lighting fixtures I wasn't too concerned about. We don't get into that often, and I just don't imagine it's gonna be, I don't know, something strange.
that's not my biggest
So I would
concern
say
either,
is if
but-
it's a detail that you can articulate and want to see, staff review, you can say it that way. If you want to peel something out of this, approve the rest. And the other thing comes in as another COA at the next meeting, that's fine. But how exactly we're working, let's say, in the new ordinance, I'm trying to work towards how you all could instruct me to review things and okay them. But I think that's the simplest path. Give clear instruction or pull that piece out and ask it
So
Yeah.
for example, on the east court site, that COA was approved with a final presentation, which still is pending,
Right.
of sample panels for brick and color palette. Right. So it's essential, that's sort of what I'm proposing.
Yeah. As long as it's not a, the COA on massing, like we used to do. I mean, there is the litmus test for me is, are you approving something that they can get a building permit with? And so if you peel it out or add it up, that's fine with me.
It seems to me that this would be the cleanest, in this case, to peel it out and request the detail for the portico as a separate COA. But given that 95% of the rest of the project is fine, that we move forward with that piece so that the project can proceed.
Specifically, this is the glazing and the 5 openings on the south entrance.
No.
And the 2
Yes.
doorways behind it.
But almost more importantly, the fact that you're changing the original building's fenestration, like the central door, the main door, you come into the building right now, they're proposing to change to a window. And the 2 flanking
Two
windows.
doors, right,
The 2 flanking
are becoming
windows,
a
they're
door.
proposing to change to doors. That's a major change. And I think we all recognize that the functionality, the proposed new functionality of the building justifies that change, but we need to see the details on that to do our job correctly. And therefore, yes, also the glass infill, like basically I would just say the new entrance of the loggia and into the building needs to be submitted as a new COA. The other proposed changes are acceptable to include the new Sally Port, the new secure corridor addition, and I'd even venture to say the new entry plaza in front of the 1938 building is acceptable.
Yep. Yep.
So-
Sounds like you're close to a
I
motion.
am close to a motion. Just haven't had
It's on
much
page
practice
10.
at carving stuff out in a motion, but I can try.
If I could just say that
Sure.
omitting the infill of the 5 arched openings and information regarding the south,
Is
you know,
that, is that
Changing
entry-
south?
apertures.
Is that south?
Yeah, I know, I mix it up too.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
information regarding the south entrance, specifically the current entry door and the
Yeah.
double hung windows on
Because
either
quite
side.
frankly,
And then,
that's not even called out in this application, it's just shown on the floor plan.
it's just one of those like,
So-
oh, it's inside.
And I know, I
Yeah.
think y'all got a lot going on.
That's why,
So-
that's why I have such an excellent BAR helping me on this.
Before we craft that motion, Eric, is there anything that any
I
response?
think that actually makes a lot of sense, and that works with where we are in the schedule and what the project needs to be doing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
great.
very helpful.
Good.
Okay.
All right, I'll try it out.
Before you do, may I ask one question?
Sure.
So, the comment was made that, just simple glass panels might be more suitable. I mean, I know that they'd love to find any way to keep the cost from mounting on these projects. So, I mean, do you all see that as a viable alternative?
So
You
here-
send that around?
So this is the example that I would propose.
Is it frameless? Is that,
Yeah.
Kind of looks like it. I mean, again, this is Caroline County Annex.
yeah, it's frameless.
And I think it's completely reasonable for one county to look to another for inspiration. And it helps replicate the kind of solid void pattern and also the way that they held it back to the inside edge of the brick piers. I think is really successful. So I would encourage y'all to detail it similarly.
Well, thank you for bringing that to the conversation today and for the extra research.
Great.
I learned something.
Good.
There's for what it's worth, similar entrance detailing on the east site portico.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
a frameless
Yeah.
system.
All right. So having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the ADC district design guidelines, I move the proposed alterations to the Albemarle County Courthouse satisfy the BAR's criteria and are compatible with the North Downtown ADC District, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted with the following omission,
Exception?
with the following exception, that the south entrance loggia and entrance fenestration to the 1938 court building be resubmitted as a separate COA.
I'd like to add, propose an addition to your motion that new lighting fixtures at the south elevation, lamping will be dimmable, have a color temperature of not exceeding 3000 K, and have a color rendering index of not less than 80, preferably not less than 90.
Should we say all new? sconces?
All new
'Cause I think there's-
exterior lighting.
Accept that amendment.
I second.
Do we need to add anything about reverting to the original off-white paint color, or was that part of your submission? I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
It wasn't. It was added by Jeff, so
So if
mentioning
I
it
can
would
make
be
a friendly
fine.
amendment to the motion, that we should revert to the original paint colors.
Accept that as well.
As
Clarify
documented in
original, yeah.
1997.
Right. The paint
I'm sorry.
research proposed, I think it was called Moon Mist, if I'm not mistaken.
You could just say as previously approved by BAR in 1997.
There you go. Thank you.
I accept that.
Friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment from the applicant.
We have a second. And any further discussion? All right, call the vote. Mr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mr. Ziemer?
Aye.
Ms. Lewis?
Aye.
And Mr. Burrows recused. Mr. Timmerman?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank
Thank
you all
you
so
very
much.
much.
All right, thank you, Eric. Yeah, this is one of those on the back where, sometimes an addition and that differentiation, is it something you want to hide? Is it a thing you blend, or is it a thing you, I'll tell you, I had some conversations with Robert Watkins about this. Robert's passion is courthouses, and he had some suggestions and ideas. But it is where you say, all right, I don't really want this to jump out. I really want to, and I think it's always interesting when we do replacement windows. We want them to look, like the old windows. Shouldn't we be saying now we want a big single light glass or something? So I don't know. Always some tension in those things. Thank you all.
When you say back, were you referring to the East High, the Sally Port, or, I'm sorry?
That section above the Sally Port,
Yeah, that rear thing, like how do you,
The east.
yeah, do we, go modern and have it completely different, or you just kind of make it look like it popped out the side? But I will say, and I want to thank you all for how the discussion we've just had. This has been a long-term city-county project and pushing and
Email.
pulling, and I think we all acknowledge
Nice.
keeping the courts downtown is a positive, or the county courts in downtown. So
absolutely.
appreciate your help on this one. The next up is it is not a COA request. This is just simply a request that you all will be responding to with a recommendation to City Council. And it is the IPP designation for 104 Stadium Road. If you recall, I'm sure you do, in February, a demolition request for the property there, known as the Stone House. The demolition COA was denied by the denied by the BAR. And on appeal, City Council approved that COA in June of this year. And you all had made some recommendations to council, which they took and considered, and incorporated into the resolution of approval, with one caveat, and that was to council retained the ability to, if they so chose, to remove the IPP ahead of any development work on that project. So what's now before you, there is a development project in the works. There's a series of things that need to be approved and reviewed by Planning Commission and ultimately by City Council. And one of them is, and the applicant has included in that request, a proposal to remove the IPP designation for 104 Stadium Road, and that is done through a zoning text amendment, zoning map amendment, and by the ordinance for the BAR, the council is required to request a recommendation from you all. As mentioned earlier in the meeting, if you have, and I've offered one suggestion that you include in either motion. You can certainly suggest other options for council to consider. I think we know the history of this. I don't know how to, I can't sugarcoat it. It is in council's hands, but I think I in conversations internally and with the applicant, I can in good conscience ask you guys to reverse the position you took in February. I wouldn't suggest that, and I hope I don't sound like I'm suggesting that in the staff report. But I am laying out both options for you if you wish. The information that's in here, in the staff report, it's essentially the same, just maybe ordered a little differently, and the questions are slightly worded differently. The what you all reviewed in February reviewed the criteria for reviewing a demolition. This is this staff report is anchored in the criteria to review for the adding or removal of a property from historic designation. So again, essentially the same questions, just worded a little bit differently. So there's no new information in this staff report that wasn't there in February. And I know that the applicant is available if you had any questions. I don't believe there's a presentation prepared unless you all think it's necessary. My suggestion was that they be available to answer questions, and my assumption that you all would move rather quickly on this one. So with that, do you have any questions for me? And I think is Valerie online, or are you the, you got the short stick? Okay.
My name's Dylan, I'm with the developer Subtext.
Jeff, one clarification.
Yes.
I'm reading the city council resolution, and the piece about thoroughly documenting the existing building is already included in city council's resolution. So is there any reason that we would need to include it in our resolution tonight, our recommendation tonight? It seems like it's already established.
So I know we're getting into parsing, sentences, but I felt like it was an opportunity to say that, to request that documentation now, and not have it be contingent on something that might happen, to get that done and over with. That's singularly the reason I make the recommendation that I did.
I don't know that we have any public, but I just want to. I'm going to just ask if there is anyone online that would like to comment or have any questions on this agenda item. Please raise your hand or make yourself otherwise known. And then it's not a formal COA proposal, so I think it's open to conversation amongst the board. I'll reiterate a concern of mine is that we see projects fall through frequently, and it does happen in this town, and there's a lot of detritus still standing from unfinished projects. And I just want to make sure that in this process, I would like to encourage city council to consider mechanisms to continue to protect this property if for whatever reason the proposed development stops at any point in time prior to demolition. I don't see the reason to have this property protected if the house is knocked down.
I would agree with that sentiment. It seems that the logic of making it an IPP in the first place was related to the structure that was there. If the structure's gone, I don't see a reason why the IPP would remain. But there doesn't seem, it seems contingent on the house to me, that there's no reason why we should remove or recommend the removal of the IPP at this stage until that house, as the house is standing, that the IPP should remain, but that the IPP could go away as the house goes away.
Yeah, I agree completely. This gives the house a chance, at least. Otherwise, even if this development falls through, if the IPP's gone, you've got no protection for this house at all. Anyone can just come tear it down.
Yeah, question, I suppose. Let's say this development did fall apart and another one came in, they would then have to go through a COA process for demolition again, right? It's a different applicant.
If the IPP remains in place.
Right.
And just to be clear procedurally, removing or adding the historic designation is it's a formal process, zoning map amendment, zoning text amendment, and you all make a recommendation, planning commission does, and council considers it. So it's, I'm not disagreeing. I think Mr. Gastinger said it best with consider a mechanism to protect this, and maybe the question would be, for clarification, would be in protection in terms of a mechanism to retain the IPP, should this project fall through. But it's, my point about saying that the process for a zoning text amendment, zoning map amendment, it's not something that's the clerk will decide on or that we can check off on it. It's sort of, it has to happen, and council makes a decision. I don't know if they can say, yeah, we're going to make this, but contingent upon what might happen in the next couple of years. I think a legislative decision like that, does that make sense, would have to be made. Now, there can be conditions to that, but it can't be sort of, yeah, we're going to vote to do this, but we're not going to do it yet. And so I think I can explore a mechanism that request to council makes sense, but I think trying to stipulate the ways to do it might be.
Like, could the IPP be reinstated if the building permit isn't filed? Or
I could ask all of those questions. I think what you're expressing, as I understand, is that, and it's the same thing we expressed to council at the appeal, that if this project doesn't go through, this building is lost. The counter to that is that council essentially granted, well, they didn't essentially, they did grant the right to demolish this. And so, and with the conditions that are here. And that's why I'm sort of pushing for the documentation, because then we know that gets done. This doesn't get lost in the weeds. It's not 2 years from now and this thing's finally going and we never got the documentation. At least we've covered that base. And then you'll just have to, I guess, trust me to go sit down with legal and say, how would we characterize it such that this structure, one way or another, or one avenue or another, isn't demolished inadvertently or without the development project getting approval? And in what mechanism? And the answer to that may be we can't, but I can check on that. Again, recommendation to council only.
It seems that the conditions that city council applied are trying to do the mechanism we're describing. And the demolition is approved, meeting the condition that an approval of a design review COA to ensure that the building is not demolished without an appropriate and city-approved replacement, is
But you see it goes back to that loop we were talking about in the preliminary meeting. That means then the BAR has purview. In order to have a design COA prior to demolition or removal of the IPP requires then that the BAR has purview over the design review. And so this is that's an option. The other option per the resolution is that council makes a decision to remove the IPP. And so that's what this question is. But otherwise, the goal from the applicant, the best I understand it, is to get the IPP removed so that the design review goes forward under the entrance corridor guidelines. Or at least acknowledge, I mean, they don't have a choice unless they ask to remove that, but that it not be this project not be under the BAR's purview.
The applicant may want to speak.
Yeah, so.
So, do you have any comment or anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I just generally want to agree with Jeff. We have a very long road ahead. There's a lot of requests we're making. There's going to be a lot of people reviewing this, and regardless of your recommendation, we're happy to work with Jeff, city staff, city attorneys to provide some assurances and make everyone comfortable. And like you mentioned with city council's decision, that's already, people have been trying to think about that and implement mechanisms to do that. We're all kind of figuring it out together. And yeah, so I mean, there's going to be a lot of eyes on this.
Okay, so there are three main issues that I see. There's the kind of primary question, which I'll say, I think would be against our mandate to support the removal of this IPP, given that we're charged to protect it. Second being Jeff's, I think, wise recommendation that we go ahead and request the documentation. And the third being some acknowledgement of encouraging city council to consider what it can to continue to protect the property if the project doesn't move forward as planned. Are there any other considerations or elements we need to include in the motion?
What was the second point again?
Jeff's,
Sorry.
Jeff's,
About documenting, right?
Jeff's suggestion about documentation of the building.
May I ask a question on that? Is there going to be any difference than what's already been included? Okay, just wanted to confirm.
Somewhat. It's, I have examples of what we've done. It's not a film documentary. It's relatively simple criteria.
Oh, no, sorry, I just
Yeah.
meant,
Different than what council.
yeah, the
ordered.
requirement that's
Yeah.
already been included.
Oh,
I think,
it's-
Jeff, the wording is almost identical.
Yes.
It is.
But I just wanted to,
I
you
guess
mean
the
it-
difference is that we'd like to request that happen, or bring it to city council's attention that should happen sooner than later, rather than just floating out there.
okay.
So, and the 3 points I understand,
It's documented.
and yeah, your first, I felt,
Demo.
yes, the BAR
Then remove it.
is under, following the review of adding or subtracting from designations, and the understanding that this has been an IPP, that you all would support it, or you all recommend it remain an IPP. Second is a clarification of the documentation, that it be done sooner, not later, and maybe you can fill in that blank or make a recommendation. And then the third piece is, and if you want to, did get how you worded it, Mr. Gastinger, but it's a consider a mechanism to protect the building and essentially to maintain its IPP status should the project not move forward. I mean, that's pretty clear, and it's something I would have to ask, legal how to say it, but I don't think you all have to say it legally tonight.
Good, because we're not lawyers. Well, most of us.
And doesn't it just
I
sort of
don't think it can be done. It's like a
Yeah, I don't,
conundrum.
it's a,
I mean, I don't want to give a legal opinion. I just think it's like a conundrum.
right, but that's the beauty of it,
You
is
really can't.
you get to just suggest it.
Well, just by saying that, we're denying the request to remove the IPP, doesn't it just sort of take that into consideration? And like, that's the first thing we gotta do. And if we've denied it, doesn't that take care of that third argument?
Well, except that city council is not going to accept our denial. They're going to deny. They're going to remove the IPP status to allow this project to move forward, no matter what we do here tonight.
You think so?
Yeah.
I do.
Why would they not?
But I think that reasonable recommendations will be taken into consideration.
If we agree
I didn't know that was then.
No.
I didn't know that was a foregone conclusion.
Well, they've already accepted
The demolition.
they've already allowed the demolition.
But have they really said, we don't want the BAR to review anything? I haven't heard that. I'm just saying, there's a possibility that
Great.
they may want us to review it. I mean, there is certainly a difference between how we review and how Entrance Corridor does. I mean, the staff report is very thorough, and the reasons, besides this being an IPP, the reason why this site would need to be reviewed, it's adjacent to Oakhurst Gildersleeve. It's, even if you didn't retain this particular building, there's a vernacular, there's a language in the architecture, around there. UVA being on several sides aside, what is on JPA, on that corner, near that corner, Maymont, Maymont, I think is the road, there's fabric there, even with this gone, that, there's good reason that I would think the applicant doesn't want this to look like, a suburban mall. I
Well-
mean, there's a reason why the applicant would want it to fit in, and be appropriate and be attractive in its location, and maybe even defer to its history,
And
even
the
with this
entrance-
building gone.
Yeah, and the entrance corridor guidelines raise all of those things. It's not necessarily, I think that the challenge with the entrance corridor is it not a design panel, although we happen to have some very good architects on Plan Commission this time. But, so the design review still takes everything you said into consideration. In fact, the scale of this project, it'll be interesting, where we go with that. So, but I think best to express what you would like council to do, would you like them, and as I said, I suspect, my opinion, I don't know, but given the direction of things and given that this, didn't we have to go, we had to go back to council because of the resolution, so having been there and heard the conversation, I would be surprised if council suddenly backpedaled. So,
Wouldn't city council want to keep the IPP designation so that we are involved?
That's
I think
that's the point I was
that's-
trying to make, sorry, in a long.
yeah, I don't think that,
But they're saying no.
I don't think that
Because there's two
that
different things.
resonates.
There's one thing about saying, yes, this can go through, and yes, you can demolish this house.
It does go through design review. It's a, the entrance corridor design
Right.
review. So I think to say the BAR would give it the better look, I don't, so I
Yeah, I
don't,
mean, I guess the point is, if that house were not there, it would not come
it
before
would not
us.
be yours.
But it ultimately doesn't impede the progress per se, just us having reviewed, so it's different, I think it's a different scenario. If they're saying, if something's put in front of them and they have to make the decision of this development's gonna go through, if we can demolish, they're gonna say, okay, demolish it. This is a different scenario. You're gonna, you're making the case now of, we would like this, designation removed because it helps us this way, and this way, but it doesn't necessarily obstruct the development or make it not happen.
Valerie, I don't know if you're able to
Yeah.
tune in on this. I wish I could speak to it better. There's a million moving parts.
Thank you. For the record, this is Valerie Long with Williams Mullen. We're legal counsel to the applicants. I couldn't quite hear Mr. Timmerman's comments just now. If you wouldn't mind speaking into the mic a little bit better.
My mic was off. Sorry, Valerie.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? So
Yes.
I think one discussion that we were having was that it's a foregone conclusion that whether, if we deny this, when it's put in front of city council, that they're just gonna override us. But I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. Like, the first time was about demolishing the property, and it seemed as if demolishing the property was an obstruction. If they couldn't do it, then the development couldn't necessarily go through. In this particular case, and I'm kind of asking the question here, in this particular case, it seems to me a little bit different, where if we were to deny this to maintain our kind of what we're here for, which is to help protect historic properties, it seems to me like it's a bit of a different scenario that city council wouldn't necessarily. I don't know if it's a foregone conclusion that they would just override us again.
Valerie, if I can quickly,
It's not a denial, it's not an approval, it's a recommendation of what council would do.
Right.
And so, yeah.
A couple things. One, I certainly wouldn't want to speak for council any more than anyone else, but if it helps, at the risk of getting into a lot more detail tonight, and Jeff could perhaps fill in the gaps a little bit here. First of all, we know that this entire project will go through the entrance corridor review process, as Jeff indicated. First, my understanding was that the reason, obviously, that property is before the BAR is because the property itself, because of the building, was designated as an IPP, and the building, and the only other reference was to the stone staircase down to Woodward or Woodrow Street. But that without the property itself, that it, for lack of a better phrase, would no longer qualify for protection. It's not in a historic district. Therefore, without the building that led to its being designated for IPP, that it no longer is appropriate to be before the BAR. I certainly appreciate the concerns about wanting to have it be a quality design and development at a prominent location, and certainly the applicants agree. We're very comfortable with the entrance corridor review. They've handled, another large project just in the past year several times successfully. It's very challenging to have to bring projects through two design review boards with potentially different opinions on things. I think it would lead to a lot of confusion, and it would lead to additional delays. So we're obviously trying to avoid that if possible, particularly given the number of applications that we're already trying to coordinate together in one place. The other thing I would add is that we did uncover substantial additional information about how and why the property was designated for IPP. We learned about that while we were preparing for the appeal before City Council. And the short explanation is that the owner of the property at the time volunteered for the stone house to be designated as an IPP as part of an offer to purchase the lot on the corner. It's the adjacent lot that's vacant now, 409 Stadium. It was literally an offer of, hey, I will agree to put this stone house under IPP protection if you will sell the vacant lot to me instead of the other person who wants to buy it and put a small apartment building on it. So there's a lot of discussion about how the neighbors and others at the time wanted 409 Stadium to stay vacant and not have an apartment building on it. And it was somewhat, frankly, I would say, of an afterthought based on our extensive review of the record. There was pretty much no discussion at the time that decision was made at council about any historic character or merit of protecting the house itself. It was a mechanism to ensure that 409 Stadium was left vacant at the time. Now, certainly when council made that decision and they said, okay, we want the house to be an IPP, then staff appropriately brought that to the BAR, and there was a staff report. I know Jeff has referenced it. It is similarly pretty thin on the merits of how the house qualifies or merits protection as an IPP. I won't say that there was no evidence, but it was thin. That's why I think when Subtext had their study done recently, it similarly was challenged to find much reason for continuing to maintain the property. The record as a whole is, even the record in front of you, there's, when you look through the criteria about the demolition criteria, it does not satisfy. There's several that it definitely does not satisfy, and there's only a couple that it really arguably satisfies. So for what that's worth, that I would say, I believe, factored into council's decision, if that helps provide some context to that particular issue.
May I just respond, just to tell Valerie, that information was made known to us during our decision. So thank you. It wasn't a later discovery. It was something that was, I think staff even brought that up, and we don't want to, of course, revisit our prior vote or council's vote to demolish or the merits of this property, as an IPP. But I just want to say that that was information that was before the BAR. So to the extent that your comments may try to impeach our earlier decision, I would say we knew that.
Well, certainly that wasn't my intent at all. I apologize if it came across that way.
I appreciate it, but it was information that was known to us when we voted to recommend.
I should clarify that it was the level of detail that we were able to determine based on further research into the minutes and into the prior staff reports. There were 3 public hearings at City Council and at least 1 meeting at Planning Commission. And I should have been more clear that we learned much, much more about the details of that prior process. Yeah. But thank you for clarifying that issue.
And that's fine. And that it probably is, to the extent that that deal, I'll use a shorthand, that deal to make this an IPP was, not as, was maybe, anyway, politically motivated or whatever, whatever the reasons for it. I think we do agree that it wasn't vetted in the way that maybe other IPPs were in the past.
And I think in context, it's what came up in the council's discussions this summer. So that's sort of showing their hand, if you will. But
well, I think with the question before us is not a retrial of that particular decision, but given that our basic charge is to apply our guidelines to protect the properties and districts under our purview, that it would be in a way impossible for us to recommend removal of this IPP designation. I think that's our role. City Council has a different role and has clearly stated a different set of priorities for this property. And so I want to suggest that I would go ahead with a motion and we can continue discussion or fine-tuning that with it out on the table. Having reviewed the criteria under City Code Section 274, I move that the BAR recommend that City Council deny the request to remove the IPP designation of 104 Stadium Road. Furthermore, the BAR has two considerations. Should council approve the request, the BAR recommends a condition that within 6 months, or if sooner, prior to application for a demolition permit, the property and building will be documented thoroughly through photographs and measured drawings according to the Historic American Building Standards, or HABs, with that documentation submitted to staff for the BAR archive. Second, the BAR recommends that City Council explore mechanisms to restore or retain IPP status should the proposed development not move forward as planned.
I second.
Further discussion? Questions? Better wording?
I guess just technical, I believe HABs is Historic American Building Survey. Just nerding out, sorry.
Accepted. Again, learning more all the time.
I would suggest just removing the word as planned and just say if the project does not move forward.
Like
you know,
within 2 decades?
The project, this project.
No, I'm just saying other projects that are perpetually not moving forward.
Do you set a date? You set a timeline for it?
No, I'm just saying, you said the project as planned, but,
Yeah, it's a little vague, so.
I don't know.
you know.
And the others, we have, what the standard we've been using the last couple of years has been, what was, for documentation, what was presented for the buildings on Virginia Avenue, measured floor plans, photographs, they weren't, we didn't get elevations, drawn elevations, but I'm not completely familiar with everything that's required by HABs, but if you wanted to.
I think that's fairly easy
Yeah.
to look up, and I think that's rather rely on them than making up on the fly.
That's fair enough. So those are my only thoughts. I don't know, editorial comment, but it's not
Yeah,
critical.
they're available through the National Park Service website.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Got a second? Shall I call a vote? All right. Mr. Whitney,
Aye.
Mr. Zemer,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Burrell,
Aye.
Mr. Timmerman,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. All right,
Thank
guys,
you.
thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I'm not sure when things are moving forward. We'll know more in the next couple of weeks, but I'll let you all know.
Will it
I-
go to council pretty quickly? Oh, sorry.
That's out of my lane. I'll let you know. It's an interesting site from I think it touches just about every section of the zoning ordinance with various things, so it's going to be, it is an interesting one to see how we peel
I
the
mean,
onion.
considering our action, did council ask for our action?
It's
or
required by
It's
the
required for
code,
zoning,
right.
okay.
So that's, there are, for a normal zoning text amendment, zoning map amendment, let's say someone wanted to change it from residential to highway commercial, council could ask you, the ordinance allows them if they choose, but for this, the changing of the designation, IPP, ADC, HC districts, the ordinance requires that you make a recommendation. So, and I realize Robert always called the roll, so we guess we should assign that to Molly or I. My apology for not jumping in there.
Chair can call roll.
Yeah, chair can call roll. I think the only reason Robert did the Zoom thing.
Actually, we're going to discuss that in a little bit. That's one of the
That's why.
things I wanted to bring to your attention.
Zoom.
Not
Pretty much
often.
thing.
The
Because I remember you saying there's the property that was demolished.
Right.
over on-
And that was raised in 2014 following, so there are a couple ways to get to the finish line. One is council overturning. The other is the landowner can appeal to the courts, depending upon what council, should council deny the COA, then there's an appeal to the courts. And then there's also the avenue of, depending upon the value of the property, that it is made available for sale. And if at the end of that period, if the property has not been acquired by someone else, then it kind of becomes an automatic demolition by right. So that's and that's what I think occurred with the building over near Burnley Moran.
Riverdale.
Yeah, and I honestly don't know of others. I know a building that got squashed on Ridge Street a while ago. I don't know if that's when it was an IPP or in a historic district. I actually get that call from people all the time when they're doing assessments or appraisals, I'm sorry. I say, well, if a tornado goes through and blows this building up, what would the BAR make me do? And in both the recent questions to that, I've said, we are not going to make you restore, reconstruct, recreate that building. But whatever you build would have to be, reviewed by the BAR. Mm-hmm. So, kind of an interesting question. So, like my house is an IPP. If it got swooped up in a tornado and there was nothing left but the bricks on the ground, my wife would be happy because I'd have to build a new house with higher ceilings. So I know there's a couple that have been changed, but I think primarily it's been through demolition. There were when the IPPs were first designated, it looks like sometime in the 90s, there was a longer list than we have now. I'm still trying to piece together what happened to, and I think some of it was because they became ADC districts and were just folded into it, but that's where we stand. And I know, is Greg Jackson on? He is. So I was just going to say, one of the things I'm going to, since we have 8 IPPs, but you can give a thought to this. In the ordinance, the ordinance rewrite, I've suggested that the property where the structure was raised, I suggest that be removed from the IPP list. That's another one I get a lot of questions. This is that corner below Burnley Moran where the food trucks and people call me all the time, if I develop it, do I have to go to the BAR? Yes. It's within an entrance corridor, so it would get design review. I figure just remove it and eliminate that. There are 8 parcels that are within ADC districts, so they have the double. People always say, oh, well, like Windhurst, oh, it's got both, so it must be more important. But being on both doesn't change how you all review it. But I actually met yesterday with Mary Joy, and she had some good points for. She goes, a lot of those that are IPPs, they're really truly unique, and it does that IPP designation sort of simply, if nothing else, indicates that level of importance in and of itself. So I've decided to not suggest that we take those off of the list. So later on, I'm just going to be talking about the one that has been raised. So, excuse me. I know Greg's here online. There are 2 things he wanted to ask you about. As again, one is that the Market Street market, not Market Street. I'm sorry, the West Main, the market on West Main. Adding some canopies and some deck areas seems relatively simple, but he had some questions, and then about the windows across the street from City Hall, across Market Street. So, Greg, I'm going to hand you the mic if you're on, and really this is for you. What questions do you have for the BAR, and what would you like to leave tonight with? It's entirely in your hands.
Hi, Jeff, and hi, board. Thanks for hearing me. Jeff, do you have graphics that I sent? I see you showing.
We do, and Molly can scroll to whichever. Can you see on the screen now, or?
Yeah, let me see if I can get it bigger. It kind of went smaller. There
So
we
we
go.
have what you
It-
sent. You just describe it, and we'll find it.
Yeah, so there's two projects that we're exploring right now that would be under BAR's review. And these images here are of the Mickey building across from you guys, where Tonic restaurant is and such, the courtyard there. In that courtyard is a mixture of steel, the steel windows from, his previous additions along the way, going back. And then also fairly recent storefront for mainly the doors. One fairly recently approved. I don't know if you have all that in front of you, Jeff, the record of that, but on the south-facing facade is a lot of storefront with the black finish, and then there's a lot of steel windows on the west-facing facade that are painted white, and a lot of those windows are having issues as far as just structurally staying together. Glass, coming out naturally from the time frame, but the frames are becoming somewhat problematic, and there's a desire for thermal and sound, quality better than what is there. So what we're exploring is a storefront system that is a thin profile, but then there's muntins profiles of muntins that are designed to match up fairly close to the profile that's there now. That is a simulated type of application applied to the glass, so you can have the functionality of the bigger glass fields. So that's what the owner is interested in, and all of this started from me sending you, Jeff, an email, just kind of checking in, seeing if what you thought, and we've been bouncing back and forth, and whether it be in front of a few board members, and you suggested just showing up, to kind of have a preliminary view of it. So that's one of the projects. I don't know if there's more images of that one. I'm not sure what you have queued up, but there's also that's just like one manufacturer's brochure of different profiles, just as a sample of what is happening on some projects. There's one actually over near Tractor Supply, past it, the new project there that's called the Hudson. They have some applied, not as good quality as we expect to have, but that's an example of applied muntins to a storefront system.
So, hey, Greg, let me just jump in. So, yeah, we
Yep.
were, when I talked to Greg about this, my response was, the historic nature of that building, these windows are original to it. It is that they are an element of that. They're not something that was added later, and again, this is me telling Greg that for a window project like this, the first step is to present to the BAR why the windows need replacements versus repair, and then if that, where that question goes, then what is an appropriate replacement? And I think as much as anything, I just wanted to, if you all disagree with that instruction, not suggesting tonight you say yes, no, but it's really, if there were, to me, if there's a hurdle to get over here, or if there are questions to be answered here, that they would need to present or offer to you all. That's what I wanted to ask of you, to share with Greg.
I've got a question. Greg, this is Roger. Is the question, are you asking whether you can use an applied muntin to a storefront?
Well, that's what we are looking at. That's what the owner would prefer to do.
And I mean, don't we already allow simulated divided lights
With a spacer bar.
So the only question would be, like, certainly it would have to be on both sides of the glazing, not just on one side. But other than that, I don't really personally see a problem with it if we already allow it on SDLs.
You know, and we will put together the graphics and show and, you know, make a specific recommendation. But part of the reason with this as well, there's already a good amount of storefront in that courtyard that's happened over the years and decade. And it, you know, it seemed like the solution that works best for that particular area.
What's the main motivation behind it? Is it energy efficiency or operation or?
Yeah, the thermal qualities of energy efficient, the sound, you know, I believe there's a bit of sound on, you know, coming through that type of system, but in the reason for it coming about is that there's a lot of disrepair, and, you know, the folks that we've had come out to work with it, you know, it just seems like it's going to be daunting to try to repair that system and work with that, the existing steel frames.
And I think if I could add one other thing, is I mentioned to Greg, can I share my screen? Is that, let me share this and show you all. So that's the front facing, and so we're talking about this section down here. That's facing Market Street. Here's inside. There's the old famous BAR haunt. The tin whistle was there. But so, and then there's another image. So there's, in those three sides, there is some variation to what's been done, and I suggested that sort of as a maybe where I would argue to stand firm is that front facade, you know, there's some maybe valid reasons for the interior of the courtyard to look at those windows, and but I urged Greg to say, can the front windows be retained? Can they be reglazed with insulated glass? Because that is it is a critical elevation, and not, you know, that to me that is that front of the building. The windows are part of it.
And
Agree.
I'm not
Yes.
sure if the owner is listening in, can raise his hand or reply, but my understanding is we're not, and I'm sorry for not clarifying this earlier, but we're not intending to mess with that facade at this point. The only intending for the two facades within the courtyard that already have a mixture of the storefront, and we would put it all the same color as a black in that courtyard.
Did Ali want to say something? He raised his hand. Do you want to call on him? Ali Kajin, right? Ali, do you want to?
I'm sorry, I guess I can't hear very well. Did I click the right button?
Yes,
Yep, we can
you're
hear
on,
you,
you're
yep.
live.
Yeah, I think our proposal is, if you look at the main part of the building with the old wooden windows, I think we have storm windows on all of those windows. So even in the future, I don't see the need to do anything with those windows. I would agree with Jeff. Our proposal is only to make consistency within the courtyard, not to do anything in the front on Market Street, on East Market Street.
And please give me assurances you won't touch the Babar lights, sconces, Ali.
Yeah, Gabe would kill me.
Thank you, thank you.
Any other questions for us, Greg or Alan, or any questions on the board? I think sounds like there might be some. I think some sympathy for that approach, is to work on the courtyard. I guess the only question I have is if that front window, looking at that last picture, had a big truck in front of that corner, but you do see that first bay in conjunction with the front facade. I don't know if that makes it too wonky inside the courtyard, or if it's better just treat the courtyard in a similar vein.
So that, yeah.
Like that-
Oh,
that-
okay, my screen's
that
blocked,
window.
but this window, I will just,
Right.
Retain,
yeah, at
retain
that
the
far,
windows that wrap around the corner at least. How would that be, Ally? What do you think about?
I don't know, I haven't thought about it. You're looking at the window of the very corner of the courtyard and the main street. Our main problem has been in the upper story windows. We've had them repaired, welding done, to try to keep them together. And we're on those upper ones where the architect's office is. They're the ones giving us most trouble from a water penetration point of view.
Yeah.
So we could look at there's one issue is the color of the windows, and you're going from white to black, right? And,
Right.
and I think what we're stuck, somehow when Gabe first got approvals to stick the storefronts in, he got approvals to do bronze color, or black. So that's what I'm kind of interested in trying to get consistency in the courtyard now, because we're a little bit all over the place. We can give thought to where that stops,
Yeah, I have to agree. That is a good question and a good thought for, both the first story and the second story on that corner. In looking at the image that's being shown now, I am noticing that the storefront is in that same space on the inside.
Right.
So that raises another little, tug back and forth to the dilemma as to how to handle that situation. But yeah, that's something we definitely could look at and see if we can come up with a solution.
Maybe the BAR needs to do a site.
Yeah.
Good time is, cocktails.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, really? We weren't thinking of that.
I think the courtyard came out pretty well, so I'm kind of happy with the courtyard. So
Yeah.
It did.
Gabe
It's a
would be
great,
proud.
great structure.
yeah, and I'll say, that pavilion, I walk out of my office every night and walk past that on my way home, and it's so successful. It really is what an active place it is. Would have loved it when the Tin Whistle was still there. I've been great. But it's just a really neat place in the city of Charlottesville overall. And applaud Gabe, or not sorry, Al.
Gabe and Ally.
Yeah, Gabe and Ally,
Yeah,
and
both of them.
Greg for where it's gone. So if we could I can close this up saying nobody shrieked and said, "Don't do it." I think Greg, there's some, we understand you're looking at the inner courtyard, and I think it's preparing some images that we can work from. It's something that you can bring back to the BAR and initiate that discussion.
Okay.
Does that work? All right.
Yes.
So I'm going to close my screen. Molly's going to go back to the West Main images, and you can talk through what you're thinking. I had said to the board earlier, Greg, I thought I didn't see anything that even raised any questions for me. It almost seemed like a consent agenda type of thing, but if you had something specific, but I didn't see a problem with it. Molly, do you have those, or do I have to do something?
Yeah, there's a PDF that may be, plus maybe some existing images, but the PDF will probably suffice if you have that.
We do.
Mhm.
We did.
So is it just like a clear story that you're creating, Greg? Just to dive right in, I don't know.
Well, that's a previous BAR
Okay.
addition that you see on top of Main Street Market, and that's under construction now.
Got it. Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I've only been on for 2 years or so, so. Awesome.
Yeah, so you can see the framing and all that. That's under construction, and so that's some context. I guess we can move on through this, just to remind ourselves of what we're talking about.
Thank you.
And it's a little hard to tell with all the construction, scaffolding and such, but that's an overall image. And it's kind of helpful now that I see the other building, the gas station 420 West Main. That was a VAR approved canopy there. I'm not sure if many people have been able to see that in person, but that's a metal frame, and it has a translucent panel system roofing that allows light through, but creates some shade and protection from the weather. And that is what we're talking about on the other side of Main Street Market building at Orzo Restaurant. If you can see that, and I guess the images will come up at some point if you want to move through. And also, we're going to see first some other decking there that we're talking about coming off of the upstairs. The addition allows for that upstairs to function. That used to be the chocolate factory, Gerhardt's, I believe. And when I walked through there, it was quite great as a chocolate factory, but it was kind of low beams. And so a lot of this, that addition is just raising the roof, so to speak. And the intent for these decks that you see in the foreground are to, have outdoor outside space there. And what would change on the building itself is that door you see, which mimics the other facade. I'm not sure if we're going to see that in any of the images, but on the other facade, there's a door that opens out to nowhere, really. But this
Greg,
would
it's this here on the right, the orange decking,
Yeah.
and the canopy above. That was the key question for the BAR. correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the proposals we are thinking about for this project, is that to have that outdoor space. And what's shown there is you come out and there's a step up to a higher deck, and that has a covering, a roofing, but the first deck is open air, and the driveway continues through under it. And we may also, we're thinking about incorporating a stair from that area as another egress. So that's what that is about. And then the orzo covering comes up later as well, as you can see it to the left of the screen there. And so the one on the right that we just talked about would be metal frame and tongue and groove wood decking. And then the roofing of that one on the right would be the translucent, just to keep that language consistent. It seems to be working well for our projects. And the orzo project, there's a desire for that to be a little softer of wood timber. And we're showing it sort of dark stained, to try to just kind of keep it a little more in context with perhaps that type of, building. So I'm not sure if there's a lot of slides, so you can go through. So that's another image. And what's below with those purple columns and the wood railing is something that's already approved and built. And what we're doing is adding, those columns and frame and roofing to that to create a canopy. There's a real need in these restaurants to have these coverings, these canopies for outdoor dining. And there is a canopy shown over Albemarle Baking Company. It's kind of part of, exploring all of this and kind of pulling it all together. I don't know if Alan wants to chime in or if there's questions. I show that in two different, versions, so to speak. One actually has a grass roof on it. There's just different things that we're just kind of looking at, and we'll develop it and present it officially. But just, the email to Jeff was like, what do you think? Just getting a little feel for things. But definitely the orzo covering we want to pursue, and the deck, the outdoor deck and such for the upper floor. And I'm kind of, open to, having the Albemarle Baking Company covering, just continue a language.
I think all of this, a lot of this is tenant generated. You build something for one restaurant tenant, and then the other restaurant tenants want something similar. So that was why the Orzo covering came about, because of what was done at the former Little Star. Jerry, the baking company, doesn't need an outdoor area. So you say to yourself, well, how do you make sense of it architecturally without doing something he really doesn't want, right? And so I think we're still struggling with that a bit from an architectural point of view. And that's why I think Greg did what he did, because Jerry doesn't need the outdoor area, probably doesn't want it. But how do you create, do the other outdoor areas and make them look somewhat consistent with whatever you do over the baking company? So that one we're looking probably for feedback on. What can we do to make it make sense out of it architecturally?
What is the thought on having the 2 decks stepped rather than one level?
I could just try to get more height underneath it because the building's changed there. One is covered, one's not. So just trying to distinguish those areas. And we could probably make them uniform. I mean, one level and just cover the back. That may make it actually, from an operator point of view, they may prefer that not to have steps. We just have to make sure we have the adequate height to do that.
An outdoor dining area. Is this an outdoor dining area, Ally?
Depending on who the tenant is. The one tenant we're talking to, wants the outdoor area. So and that's probably also a reason for a second staircase coming down.
Well, I think, Greg and Alan, the covering at the gas station is just so successful. I think that design really came off really well and enhanced that building and brings life to the street. It's does so many things really well. And I think part of the reason why it works is that is its lightness, and the steel structure is distinguished from the historic building. And I think that in my initial reading of this, I think that the lighter steel pieces could very well have the same effect here in being largely visually quiet and reasonable appendages to an otherwise masonry building. I think the piece for me that I'm struggling with is I think I heard you say wood on the porch at Orzo, which seems a bit out of character with
Okay. Let me address that.
Yeah.
I would have chosen metal, but the tenant wanted strong view about wood. I don't care.
Well, there's just few precedents for that on Main Street, and there's and it seems more in keeping to stick with a metal canopy.
Yeah, so I would say, if you are very clear that you don't want metal, I just have to. I told the tenant already that I don't know how you're going to react to wood when we've used so much metal elsewhere. So I've kind of given them a warning. So I'm fine with that decision.
I guess, with all respect to your tenants, tenants change. And so I think we need to keep in mind that as this project develops, we need to let the building kind of dictate what it wants and what it needs. This is James Zimmer, by the way. And I kind of wonder if it doesn't make more sense just to carry that canopy all the way across the front facade of the building. It would make it look like a market. And, as tenants change over the years, their desires may be different. And so it's more of giving uniformity to the front facade of the building, I think would be more successful in the long term.
Oh, I think I have to ask Greg, what does that do to the parking? Because right now those are parking spaces.
Well, when he suggested it, what I envisioned right away was the canopy that's at Albemarle-Bacon County Company, the one that's shown with that's in this image, would continue all the way across at that depth, and then it would, push out there at Orzo, is the way I imagine seeing it happen, so that it kind of is a canopy for the sidewalk area, and the one at Albemarle-Bacon Company is for, the doorway you come out with your fresh cake, you got time to regroup before you get into your car or something, and certainly the canopy all the way across. I mean, the markings on the building somewhat lend to it, it's got that strong horizontal band there in a sense.
Begging for
and when we looked at old historic surveys, there used to be, we can find those and present them there. From my memory, Alan, you might remember better, but there were canopies all in front of this building. It was a car dealership, and I think they maybe they parked the show cars out there, but there were canopies out in front of this building. So I'm warm to that idea. There is one little, canopy type original with the building that's a semicircle that I think, would fall just under there, would be probably fine if we do it delicately enough, and we do it with the metal as suggested.
I guess, I don't know, it seems like there's support for canopies here. We're just gonna have to work through the details.
Yeah, I think that was a good suggestion. Just keep it real simple and across the line, maybe that same roof line extends further at the Orzo terrace.
Or at both,
Or at
so
both.
it's symmetrical.
Or at both.
Yeah, I mean, there is outdoor seating at Albemarle-Bacon Company. I know the way Alan is thinking about, justifying it in other, legends than just the building and aesthetics. But there's certainly plannings there already. But I can see that too, because that could be a nice little outdoor seating on the other side, and it's a nice balance.
Yeah, I recognize the argument that tenants aren't there forever, although I'm more afraid about landlords not being there forever, frankly. It's just, I think I'm on 30 years with Hamilton's, and Orzo, when I do these kind of improvements, I usually want them to sign a longer lease. So,
I guess my concern is the way it's been presented so far. It's very hodgepodge and just looks like it's sort of slapped together without much consistency. And so that's what I'd look for.
Yeah, this is Roger. There might be a way that you can introduce some wood without it being quite so heavy timbered looking, which I think is that's the clash that I see with the real light metal. It could be the underside of a roof that exposes some warmer wood, or
That's a good idea.
timbers that aren't quite 8x8s. Almost what it looked like.
Yeah, the decking to the right, to the west, is a mixture of wood, metal frame, light metal frame, and wood decking.
Although if they liked what you did at the gas station, I would just demonstrate to them that part of why that's successful is it lets so much light in on that north facade, because the metal allows all those members to be really small. It would be a very different look trying to do that with a lot of wood, and would not be nearly as hospitable.
I think that's fine.
All right. Well, there seems like there's some good enthusiasm for a direction there. Is there any other questions you have, Greg, or that we can help you at this time?
No, I think that's good. I can imagine how it can be modeled out and looked at, and certainly we have to consult with structural. What I'm thinking, as at this point is, is there a connection, how to connect it with the decks on the side? And it looks like it could be the same line, so I think that even if they don't touch, there would be a same horizontal datum there that would help, it all relate. So I'm good. I think that's great input. And, instead of less or no canopies, we're tasked with maybe looking at it being more and more consistent and, not tiptoe into it, but, make it happen.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful building. I think just keeping it as simple as you can would do the building well and be less expensive.
Agreed.
All right, Greg.
Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, very quickly, let me wind down the last couple things. Is that I'm not feeling well. I know you guys did make, so, first thing, I don't remember I told you about it before, but I sent the article in the paper. We did receive state funds.
Give me one sec, Jeff. Your mic has died.
Oh, it's going on and on. Thank you, sir.
Rex did too. It must be time to end the
It's a
meeting.
sign, yeah.
Too many public
So,
meetings.
yeah, we did get the
We've worn
state.
out the mics.
State grant towards the GPR analysis at McKee Block. Did not get the funds for the evaluation of the artifacts at Swan Tavern, but I'm continuing to try and figure something out for that. The other announcement, and I say this to you all and everyone out there watching on Channel 10, we are short, we have several vacancies on the Historic Resources Committee. So if anyone is interested in applying, we meet every second Friday between 11 and 1 in City Hall. And you can go online or email me, but go to the applications online for boards and look up Historic Resources Committee, and there are several vacancies. So anyone interested, encourage you, and if you all know anyone, or if you all would like to do more for the city. Did you put up an image of the Grady Avenue trees? Oh, darn. Well, I mentioned it at the beginning, that these trees in front of this apartment building, the trees are fine, they're huge, but what would be necessary in a request from an applicant? I've suggested they provide an engineer's report. That's primary concern, is that the trees are so close to the foundation. But I just didn't know if there was something you all would want to see or expressed or an expert opinion on. But are you looking at it on, or should I can.
Where is it on Grady?
What are you talking about?
So on Grady Avenue, boo.
Are they asking you to take trees down? Or?
Yep, right there.
Where was this in our pack? I'm sorry.
It's not at all. I'm just asking it. So it's not, actually, so there's two questions. One, up the street's one where it was dead, and I said, this is what I'll let you do. But it's these two trees, and it's, I just was like, well, what would the BAR want to see, know, hear? What kind of house, what's a determining factor?
Are they doing physical damage to the buildings?
That's what they've expressed.
Do they have pictures?
I do not, but I can get them.
So it's either a structural
So I said,
report
I've asked for
or
a structural engineering report.
Can only imagine, look at this.
They're pretty awesome.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
I'd tear the building down before I cut the tree down.
I think Molly actually said that.
All in favor?
Or preservation.
I mean,
Thank God.
Yeah.
We'll approve that demolition.
Yeah.
The only thing about that building is that apartment on the upper floor, this side, when I was in grad school, we had dinner with a professor, and our daughter flipped out because we all got pudding in a nice bowl, and they gave Katie her pudding in like an old
Plastic cup.
plastic cup. Yeah, it was one of her worst meltdowns ever. So that's a memorable place. But other than that, no, I don't.
Individually protected for you?
That's right.
That
So,
apartment only.
Historic event happened
Historic
there.
event associated with the
So
right
that's,
person.
that's what I want to know, is that structural engineers report,
And/or arborist report.
absolutely an arborist report. So, all right, and that'll be coming to you. So, and I think,
I guess they would, if they were serious about, then I think it would also want to include a planned replacement strategy for cannabis.
This is Deodora Cedar, maybe?
I think so.
that's helpful, thanks. Again, it's just to confirm that what I'm asking isn't overstepping and fits. Yeah, I rode by there the other day. I said, that tree is dead, it's leaning, remove it. What are you planning in its place? Need to get a site plan amendment approved, and
Yeah, okay.
a little troubling. And I know there's some other, what tree, Breck, is it? Is another blight coming?
You don't even want to know.
I know, it's just like,
Oh, no, what is it?
Another blight coming?
yeah, I mean, there's some,
Yes.
I don't know which tree, but it's just, and it's like the thing with the emerald ash is once they're dead, they are very brittle and prone to falling over. So I don't recall what that one was, but that's the other one I'm talking about, but I'm handling that one. All right, next question. On the ordinance, and that's the revisions, I know you all received, or Breck did, you may have also seen it, letter from Preservation Piedmont, a series of letters. I just wanted.
I only saw one.
And most of so there's the one letter sort of is addressing some larger themes of the whole ordinance, and then Mary Joy has presented some specific things to address within the historic preservation and
Were we
design.
sent this?
So the letter one letter that Jeff's referring to was really addressed to James Fries, and I happened to be copied on it, but it just was in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, so I just didn't.
But you began by saying there have been a series of letters. I've seen one.
Well, that's
So I don't
helpful
think
to know. Yeah,
I'm at a point, I mean, I'm not on a Preservation Piedmont, obviously, mailing list, so I'm not at a point to comment on.
Fair enough. I didn't mean it like,
Okay.
I just meant, yeah, there's a lot of letters flying. I think, Molly and I have figured out, or at least we have stomped down some of the people sending you general questions, although you're still getting a few of them. So I never know how many or how far things get circulated, so that's fine. You didn't see it. But if you had any questions, those who may have seen it or talked to someone for Pres Piedmont, or if you have any questions for me about the ordinance, I just wanted to offer this opportunity to, and if nothing?
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I guess maybe that might also add some questions. So, I would we don't have to decide tonight, but I do want you each to think about, well, one, pay attention to the zoning ordinance changes, and as a citizen, and then secondly, as a BAR member, or even thinking about future BAR members and how our review would be, how that would change. The question that I have for us in the moment is, if we feel like there is a role to make a statement or to respond to either to City Council or to the planning department. That's one question. The second is Preservation Piedmont has been doing a lot of very detailed review, which is I think extremely valuable. And I think you received in the last month's meeting, we had a printed version of their letter. I will say that my read of it is there's kind of two threads. They had a public letter to City Council and Planning Department that spoke more generally about the zoning changes and the role of the BAR and in historic preservation with these changes. And then there is a second thread that is much more technical, detailed a very thorough, detailed review of the zoning amendment that was not submitted to council, was more within neighborhood services. And that sets a letter that I received just in the last few days. And I think I'm happy to share it with you. I think you would probably appreciate the level of detail that they've gone through and added and supplied comment. So there's a lot of stuff, but so the first question, whether or not we need to respond related to the zoning amendment, the other is whether we or how we should respond to the work that Preservation Piedmont has done. Informally, I've offered some gratitudes, but I think there probably is a role for us to both receive the information that they've shared and then offer additional comment or thanks.
The second letter that you talked about, that you just got, does that get into kind of the issue that they bring up in that first letter, where there are some discrepancies between BAR guidelines and the ordinance? And I've been sort of trying to get to where that is, because that's really important to us.
Yes, yeah, it's a much more sort of line by line, like careful reading of specific pieces in the changes where they suggest. It's more editing kind of suggestions and technical suggestions than. I'll share it with you and you see what you think.
I'll say most of their things are in the old ordinance, or the current ordinance, if you will, and the new ordinance. The new is not a modified version of this. It's a new document. It's a lot of. So I've been saying, all right, is it there? Is that here? Has it been reworded? Has it been reworded poorly? So there are a lot of things where Mary Joy, and she's been leading that part of this discussion, very familiar with how the ordinance, particularly with the Historic Conservation District, I think she even wrote that way back when that first came out. And so understanding some of the maybe nuance and minutia that is in the wording that might seem generic to us might have some greater or lesser weight. So we've gone through on those. So that's not necessarily substantive. It's just being consistent with our language. For example, and I didn't realize this, we're not required by state code, the notice letters and things. We do a little bit more than is required. But Mary Joy pointed out that at the time, the city felt it was important that, when these things come up, that we notice people. So it's like, oh, thank you, because I didn't know that piece. The other part of some of it is I've sought through this rewrite and working with my boss and up the ladder is to say there are things that don't have to go to the BAR. How can we, without having a 1,000-page list of all the possibilities, how can we create something that allows staff discretion, or at least staff to make decisions? So, and I think that's what you'll see in a letter. Pres Piedmont might disagree with me on some of those. So fair enough. That's their statement. Another big one is trying to, for example, where you all have purview over design, and I keep using High Street, East High Street, where you have buildings 20, 30 feet back, 2 and 3 story tall. The zoning is now for 5 stories and 0 to 10 foot setback. If you all in the review say, no, we really want to continue the design, that what we have there be consistent with that, it still comes to you, BAR still reviews it, but it's still appealable to council. So there's the tension of, should we change the zoning there so that it more fits what's there, or but they cannot in an ordinance say there's a reference to the BAR has purview here and sort of acknowledging that and recognizing the importance of that, but the ordinance cannot say the BAR prevails over city council. So, and I think they all understand that, but it's really trying to, where necessary, to emphasize that BAR has a role. And then there was one where I had a question. So the sign regs, the way the code is currently written, I review sign permits if that's the only request. But if it's part of a project, then you all review the design during the COA process, even though there's still a sign permit process. I said that I've never had a project on, maybe we had one or two, wish Carl were here, but we've never reviewed signs at the design level. I mean, unless it's like sort of some, special monument sign design where you're looking at the thing, but not what the, you're not looking at the signage. And, Breck, I don't know, maybe.
We've reviewed
Yeah.
quite a few signs, I think, over the years
Okay.
with projects.
'Cause I need to.
Dairy Market in particular.
Well, that was a comprehensive signage plan.
Yes.
Curiously, this new ordinance has nothing in there for comp signage plans, so I'm wondering how we're gonna revise the ones we have, but it would be, but like the signage itself, there may be a monument sign that's
Yeah.
part of the architecture, that you're looking at, but what that tenant puts on that.
Oh,
I've
no,
never-
we don't review the text, but we review the sign design.
And I think that's a helpful way to make it clear is, when the structure itself is part of the design of the building, you're looking at that, but still,
I think the challenge with that is that it's just so out of sync with the design development of the rest of the project that we don't see it by the time they actually design the signage.
Right.
That's way past when they would have gotten a COA.
Right. And here, I'm going to share my screen just to show you an image that, this is, go on, zoom in. So I'm going back and forth here. So the new ordinance has a provision in it about this, there are different things on my screen. So there is a preservation incentive for affordable housing. And the idea being that if you preserve the front 25 feet of a historic structure, then, and if it's for affordable housing, then there's an allowance to build more. I don't want to push back. I don't know how to do it. I don't know if I'm speaking personally or BAR or staff looking at this. I just, again, here's that High Street example again. But I pointed this out that, we have a lot of historic buildings with large lots, and just keeping the front 25 feet is a bit problematic. So that's been a big topic that's out there. So I just wanted to illustrate, when you hear that, and that's my concern is I'd much rather say, if you want to build big stuff in the back, build it in the back, but don't chop the house in half and incentivize it. So,
Yeah, this is such a blunt tool.
it is. It's an arbitrary, well, I just feel like it doesn't, it could be done in a way.
And
yeah.
the guideline, I couldn't discern what the bonus is. It just mentions bonuses. I mean, does that mean you can build to your heart's content if you keep the first 25 feet? I didn't understand it. I read it. There were
Yeah.
several things that I read many times and I didn't quite understand in this ordinance.
Off-the-shelf tools, I purposely have my mic, off-the-shelf tools that
Yeah, and fair enough. And,
inserted here.
right, and I'm just really just showing to illustrate,
Planning
yeah.
tools.
This is one of the questions that I've raised and has been raised. Breck has already talked to me. He has received some questions from some folks that, contacted him as BAR chair. So just sharing with you all if this is one of the things that we're playing around with. Don't have to discuss it. And the sign thing is helpful. I think the last question really was when I mentioned, now that we are talking about the IPPs, removing the,
Wait, can I go back to that?
Yes,
just for
go
the
back.
Last one, just so, I think my concern, and this is some of what Preservation Piedmont is raising as well, is that if we get in a position where the natural and reasonable application of our guidelines is, and the Secretary of Interior standards is so far removed from the allowable zoning language, like, for instance, someone wants to take that property, preserve the first 25 feet, build whatever number of units behind, we become a kind of insignificant impediment if that is a real goal of the current of whenever this happens, that city council. And so there will be zero incentive for that applicant to really even spend any time presenting to us. They would probably prefer to get to a denial as soon as possible and go to city council and get their approval, and nobody really wins. And in the end, well, we'd get maybe more buildings, but not with the kind of design review that that we're currently providing the city.
you know, as a builder, a former builder, I can tell you, I'd always rather, I love old buildings, but when you try to put an old and a new together, you double the cost, because it's a difficult thing to work on old existing buildings. You can fix them up, but to try and add something on and alter them, you're going to spend a lot of money on, more money than necessary. So it would be, this isn't necessarily saying we don't want those things built, but I think to say that, we're going to sacrifice, whatever, 25 or the back 30 feet of a historic building to get more, I understand.
To respond to Breck's comment, which I think was a larger issue, is, I think it's a moment when we have to ask council, are we an impediment? Do you care about the historic fabric of the city, which is what we care about personally and professionally, and we care about the guidelines that are in place, as faulty as they are, they're there for a reason, so that everything doesn't get raised and, we have Jetson City or something, but I think, when Breck said, are we an impediment? We sure seem like an impediment at 104 Stadium Road right now. Sort of like a speed bump that we keep getting bumped over. So I think it's a good policy question to put to council. Do you care at all about the historic fabric of our city, or do you just not want it to look like anything in the past? I think that's, and I don't mean to be dramatic, I just think the reality's right there. Otherwise, we're just over here defending something that maybe the political will no longer wants to defend. And I'd like for council to step up and say, yeah, we do care about our past. We do care about the historic fabric and how successful the downtown mall and downtown area have been, about the quirky buildings we have, about the type of vernacular buildings we have and how they define what Charlottesville is and is not. I'd love for council to step up and say, yeah, we care. But I think I think we need to put the question to them, because it appears that we have recently become an impediment. And that's not a fun place for us as professionals to spend time, on a Tuesday night every month. Prep time in here. This meeting has gone on for 2.5 hours now. Yep.
Well, the language that tool is implying, that makes us irrelevant, basically.
Well, it just makes a false
Everything-
facade on the front of a building.
It's sort of like, it like smacks right in the face of everything that we talk about, scale and relevance and appropriateness, and the landscape that sort of reflects these historic structures. Somebody said it's a dumb tool, and and so. I
It's a
think
blunt tool,
it's a
I think
blunt
is what,
tool.
it's
Yeah.
rather blunt. It's
Yeah.
not very precise at all.
Well, it just shows no understanding
Right.
of
It's just,
architectural value.
it's like
literally-
wanting a fake facade. I mean, it's really, awful.
Yeah, and so I think it's, you ask the question, but then I think we all have an opinion about it, a pretty strong opinion, and I think we should stand up for it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because, the pendulum swings both ways, I think, and, I think, as is always the case, if you're able to incorporate, the good from both sides, then you're probably serving the community the best way possible.
Well, I think it would be useful for everyone to, in the public consciousness or in the news, or when we go before city council, those projects that are kind of weird, outliers in the context of all of the projects that we see. And so they may be thinking about the solar panel project or the shed that didn't get, they wanted to get knocked down, or 104 Stadium Road. But I think it would be helpful for us to even come up with to think of those projects and where the review process from the BAR really created tangible benefit to the public, whether it's the way that the code building developed, or the quirk, or some of the other
Even Dairy Market,
Dairy Market.
to some extent, it's,
And those projects would, I think this board and this body have created, have helped those projects improve through the course of that review. And if that review gets bypassed, there will be a chance, really a big loss for design quality within, not just in preservation of historic structures, but even in new construction, there would be, I think, significant loss of impact to public space and public well-being. So we need to come up with our top 10, top 20, some good examples. So because people don't see where that happens that doesn't go into the newspaper, that doesn't, it's harder to discern, but I think it would be useful to collect those wins for Charlottesville.
Yeah, thank you. The planning commission asked me, sitting about 10 feet that way, earlier this summer, about entrance corridor review, because that's probably what's going to change most significantly is, we're already seeing it on JPA, the scale of development. And I made the comment to the planning commission, the ERB, that I said, if you want cheap, the builders will build cheap for you. They'll put up vinyl sided and windows that'll last 3 years, and then what do you have? I said, I will say, the design review, we don't build it, we don't engineer it, but a key provision is we're looking at those durable materials. And looking at something that's not built to last, 3 to 5 years. So, there's value in that. There's value in good design and then the longevity of the structure. But, I don't know, it seemed to resonate, but I agree with you, Breck, thanks. And, oops. So last question before my computer shuts off here is
so
the.
can I follow up on kind of action for this?
Yeah.
I was thinking if we don't have any applications next month, or we have a short agenda like this, could we use the remainder of our meeting to do a work session and come up with maybe 6 to 8 recommendations, that bifurcating the building being one, that we think are really repugnant? And
I don't think
could
we
be
have a month, unfortunately.
I thought it wasn't going to be voted on until the end of the year.
I mean, let me find out where the schedule is. It didn't seem like time was ripe now, but I will ask, and if the comments can be provided in October.
Okay, why would we just spent time talking about this then?
Well, the time is now for comments.
Okay,
for
but
them to
individual
hear.
comments.
That's right.
Which
Yeah.
it would be much more powerful from us as a board.
Correct.
So Molly, you've
Frustrated.
sort of collected some of our responses. Is that going to become something that city council gets in the next?
Well, that's the question, is do we need to form, but that's not up to staff to decide. We need to decide if we want to.
It gives us, I've got some things here, and I can begin to assemble something, and, but yeah, the conversation's happening now. That's why Carl's not here. So it is a strike while the iron is hot, but
You think council's gonna vote on this, you think council's gonna vote on this in the next month?
no, I don't know when. I just know that right now, they're having the conversation.
Planning Commission had like 100 days to make their recommendation to city council, and that clock started like
Thursday?
45 days
Oh,
ago.
45 days.
That was an estimate.
Something like that, right.
There was maybe it was the production of posting the DZO in its full form started a clock of
It did.
100
You're correct.
days
You're right,
that
yeah.
they have to make their recommendation to city council.
I will answer the question, but assuming that's possible, I think that's a good idea, because
You just said there's no time,
No,
that next
no,
month is
I
too late,
just said
so
I-
I'm
I-
really confused.
well, I just think that the conversation's happening now, and
But
that-
I'm not getting these emails, and it's 8:10 at night, and I'm a little frustrated by this conversation. We've talked about this for 20 or 25 minutes, and then you said it's too late, we can't do anything.
No, I
We
didn't.
can only act as a board. I mean, if something were sent around, as,
Well,
has been suggested, Molly types up something, you come up with something. I don't, maybe we can endorse it as individuals, but as a board, we can only act together in a meeting.
So
We can just-
in the office, I'm represent BAR. I'm staff for BAR. I can offer thoughts, comments, discussions. I mean, I'm not muted in that building. But I did circulate this information, said I would even print up copies for you all at the last meeting. So I just sort of a continuation of this process. And I just had some questions, primarily to say, did you all have any questions for me based on what Preservation Piedmont said? Did you have anything, anything you wanted to know about? And then I just, because I am making a recommendation internally, that's why I had asked about the signs, and just curious what you thought about the IPPs. I will never tell you all that you can't, speak up or shouldn't. My feeling is this conversation's happening now, and if a formal statement needs to be made, you all could decide to make it. But I don't know if having discussion in October is going to meet that. So,
And that's where I think the work of Preservation Piedmont is helpful. Staff printed out that email and shared it with everybody last meeting. I think it had a lot of really good information. I think they've done a lot of the homework, the same kind of review that we would do ourselves, but don't all have the time to do. And so I think that's a place to start, is to not try to feel like we have, I don't think it's our role either to provide a comprehensive review of the entire zoning ordinance. But I do think that you can use that as a place to start, and I've invited comment. I did hear from a couple of people over the last month. If I would invite more, and I think we could, amongst ourselves, collect the things that we feel are most important to say. But it does need to be happening in the next. I think by the planning commission's meeting tonight. I mean, to respond to public comment over from the meeting Thursday. So it's our chance to affect any change is now, not in probably a month.
and then that's all I had, and then on that. And as far as the guidelines go, if you had any questions about that, appreciate everyone's comments. Our goal for next month is Chapter 5. And I don't, certainly, when I bring things to you at the end of the meetings, that's usually I just bring the stuff that's come my way, questions I have, but, I can formalize those things, and if it's not not an application or something, or do you want a staff report for everything? I don't know. I'm not trying to frustrate you guys, just sharing with you what I hear and know. But I can say nothing if that's better, so.
No, not at all. We want to hear about it. I just don't, it wasn't on the agenda. I would have put it, frankly, it's too bad that after 3 hours and 15 minutes, that it seems like the most important thing was discussed at the very end. I would have, if I had made the agenda, I would have put it front. I mean,
Can't do that.
that's
Yeah, I know.
that's not true. That's,
Well,
that's
I
not true.
mean-
We have prerogative over our agenda.
Okay. I mean, that's helpful to
We can
know.
tell an applicant that they'll come, that their matter's gonna be taken up at 6, and we're spending the first hour talking about important stuff. But I just think it's hard with, you know, we don't have a proposal in front of us, a joint statement. Our homework was to review, as Preservation Piedmont said, get familiar with the zoning ordinance, see where there are holes in it, see where it doesn't line up with our guidelines and with our purview. But I didn't know that at the end of our meeting, we would be told, like, we have to act now. I feel powerless.
I don't think that's quite fair for staff or for the rest of the board. At the end of the last meeting, we talked about, I specifically requested any feedback that we would should be considering prior to the public meeting last Thursday, and I received a couple of responses. So this is not and I don't know that it's staff's responsibility to generate a response from this board.
I'm not implying that. I'm just saying I think we're all disappointed that if the time has passed, we haven't been able to do anything.
I think that the comment was not that the time has passed, the time is now. The time is not in a month.
But as I said before, we can only act, the BAR can only act in a meeting. We're constrained by public laws that
Right.
govern our action. So if we were to have a position paper to send to council or planning commission saying something, this is it. If next month's meeting is not timely and the planning commission is going to be done with their review and they'll pretty much have signed off on it and it's no longer timely, we could sign off, like I said, as individuals, and, you know, as individual BAR members, but as a body, we can't act by email.
Like, are we allowed to call a special meeting in two weeks?
Yes, we can.
That the
Okay.
topic is specifically
Right, that's what I'm
the
saying. Let's
the
get a work session.
BAR
Yeah.
interface with the new zoning ordinance.
Does it make sense to schedule it? What are the next steps after tonight? Do we know, do we have a sort of a month
Let me,
calendar timeline?
so first off, I'll say, I understand. It's stuff that I'm talking this language every day, and I come in once a month and throw my language at you as if you can interpret it, and I apologize. The second thing is that your feedback to me at meetings and these discussions, I said, in City Hall, I'm still speaking up. You all know me. That's not going to be, I'm not going to be quiet, but it helps inform and assist me in the feedback that I'm asked to give. I mean, I'm not in there saying, listen to me. I'm being asked, Jeff, what do you think about this? How would the BAR look at this? So this is very helpful to me, even if it's not in an assigned letter. I would say, let me get some answers on what's sort of the next, what happened over there tonight, get a read on the temperature of and how things are moving forward. I can best advise you. I think it would be great to have another session with you all, just to even have a conversation about moving forward on the guidelines when we're not right after having everything else talked about. So let me put together some ideas and see what would work, see where things are, and you all adjourn and we can, I appreciate your patience tonight. Neither of those were easy. The court's building complicated we know, and the IPP thing is complicated by. So again, appreciate your patience and appreciate your input, and we can adjourn until some other time.
How much notice do we have to give publicly?
1 week.
So,
And it would be a publicly accessible meeting. That it does not have to be on Channel 10.
So I got, two quick things. One, I think, we put in some work on the guidelines. That doesn't seem to be the hot topic right now.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I know it's important, but we have to give the feedback to the zoning ordinance first. Damn it, I forgot the second thing I was going to say. Oh, critical, and Molly, we mentioned this to Molly before you got here, Jeff. The email thing, it is really screwing us up. We can't communicate actively amongst ourselves by email because.
I don't know what to tell
So
you.
my IT department at UVA has basically said that the city's server is rejecting virginia.edu
It does.
emails and Gmail emails. I guarantee you those are the two most used emails in the city of Charlottesville.
So who's the IT person that we could get? to
And
fix
when
it?
I talked to my IT person this morning, she said that the city person just, they're not communicating well, they're not getting it. So one suggestion we had was, can the BAR be given city email addresses, similar to city council? And therefore, those email addresses could be all put onto the BAR group email list, and then we would be able to communicate with each other. David said he hadn't gotten them in like a month or month and a half. So if we're going to be having active conversations outside of our meeting, but can still be part of public record and FOIA and all that jazz, we need working communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm arguably the oldest person in the room. So.
I'm not saying it's your problem to
I don't
fix.
think you are.
I'm not saying it's your problem to fix. I'm just saying we need
No,
help
joking, 'cause,
fixing
like,
that problem.
To me, it's a series of tubes, and I hand
Right.
to Molly. But that does make sense.
So you're gonna let us know whether it's worth having a meeting before next month.
They have a public meeting on Thursday to kind of respond to the public hearing last Thursday.
And we're gonna
Just
communicate.
say, these are our comments coming out of
So
the
2
public
days from
hearing.
now.
Mhm.
Okay.
I
So
think
that won't-
today,
that
I think
won't be a
today they were
hearing,
meeting
but
in a
it'll
closed
be a-
meeting to,
yeah.
like, kind of prep or decide what they're taking away from the public hearing, and then Thursday
Right.
is a public meeting to present what they,
This Thursday or next?
in 2 days.
In 2 days? Okay.
So what I would suggest as we wait to figure out about a work session is that I will distribute the most recent and all of the letters from Preservation Piedmont that I have. And I would encourage you, I think your suggestion, Sherry, of 6 to 8, come up with yours. You don't have to be, we're not reviewing this, we're not technical reviewers, but what are your 6 to 8 hot items that are worth weighing in on? I do recognize, I do think that there is some value for the board to be circumspect about where it puts, because we are actually reviewing some of this stuff. I think it's a little bit weird to weigh in on some issues, but I do think that there are certainly some issues that we should very much should weigh in on, especially when it comes to process and kind of the way that projects will be reviewed in the future. But I'd encourage you to individually go ahead and collect that list, or even maybe we email them to Molly and have her compile them, or we figure out how to at least be doing that internal work over the next week or two. And tune in for Riveting TV on Thursday.
It was riveting on Thursday night. Did you all watch?
Yeah.
It was interesting. I think it's fantastic when people participate. It's that's what I used to do for almost 20 years, get people to speak up and come out and speak up. So there was a lot said, and that's the messy part that makes government fun.
Was it videotaped?
What's that?
Is there an archive of it?
Yeah, just like go into you go onto the city's webpage, it has like the little TV thing at the top, click on it, and the box cast, and you can go to that meeting, so. I suggest you all adjourn and
All right. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
as Sherry said
Second.
today,
Second.
Aye.
All in favor? If you're opposed, you can stay here.
everything comes due in September, right?